My son sent me a box of handmade birthday chocolates. The next day he called and asked Dad how were the chocolates. I smiled and said into the phone, "Oh, I gave them to your wife and the kids. They love sweets." The line went dead silent. I could hear his breath hitch a jagged gasp of pure terror. Then he screamed, "You did what?" His voice trembled so hard it cracked. That was the moment I knew. My son hadn't sent me a birthday gift. He had sent me a death sentence. I am Lucius King, 74 years old. I spent 40 years building a real estate empire on the south side of Chicago with nothing but grit and calloused hands. I have faced gang leaders, corrupt politicians, and cutthroat competitors without blinking. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the cold barrel of betrayal pressed against my temple by my own flesh and blood. Before I tell you how I dismantled my son's life piece by piece, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from. I want to know how far the truth travels. I sat in my study, the heavy oak door closed against the silence of my empty house. On the desk in front of me sat the box. It was exquisite. Red velvet finish, gold ribbon, the kind of packaging that screams expensive. Inside were 12 pieces of Belgian chocolate, dark and glossy. A card was tucked under the ribbon. "Happy 74th birthday, Dad. Try the truffle in the center. It is sugar-free just for you. Love, Darius." I stared at that box. My hands, rough from years of laying brick before I started signing checks, rested on the desk. I didn't reach for the ribbon. You see, Darius knows I am pre-diabetic. He knows I watch my sugar. But he also knows I have a weakness for cognac. The center truffle was shaped like a barrel. It was inviting. It was perfect. Too perfect. My son Darius has not sent me a birthday gift in 5 years. Not since I refused to bail out his third failing construction venture. He calls me the old man behind my back. He thinks I am a relic, a stubborn old mule sitting on a pile of gold that he deserves. So why suddenly this gesture of sweetness? My gut, the same instinct that kept me alive in the trenches of business for decades, tightened. It wasn't a warm feeling. It was ice cold. The phone on my desk rang. The caller ID flashed Darius. It was 10 a.m. He never calls at 10 a.m. He is usually sleeping off a hangover or hiding from creditors. I picked up the receiver and put it on speaker. "Hey, Dad." His voice was too bright, too loud. "Happy birthday. Did you get the package?" I leaned back in my leather chair, my eyes never leaving the red velvet box. "I did, son. It is beautiful. Did you try it yet?" "The truffle. I specially ordered it." I let the silence hang for a second. I wanted to hear him sweat. Then I lied. "Actually, Darius, I didn't. You know my sugar has been acting up lately. Dr. Vance told me to be careful. So when Emily stopped by this morning with the grandkids to drop off a card, I gave the box to her." The silence that followed was heavy. It wasn't just a pause in conversation. It was the sound of a man's world collapsing. You gave it to Emily?" "Yes." The kids were excited. I told them to eat them in the car on the way to the park. Emily called me 10 minutes ago to say thank you. She said they devoured the whole box. What happened next was a sound I will never forget. It was a guttural noise like an animal caught in a trap. "No! You did what?" His scream was so loud it distorted the speaker. I heard a crash on his end like a chair being knocked over. "Dad, tell me you are joking. Tell me you did not give that box to Emily and my children. Why are you shouting, Darius?" I kept my voice calm, steady, the voice of a confused old man. "It is just chocolate. Emily loves dark chocolate." His breathing came in short, panicked gasps. No. Emily is allergic. She is allergic to nuts. There are walnuts in those. You have to call her. You have to call 911. Liar. Emily eats peanut butter out of the jar with a spoon. She has the constitution of an ox. My daughter-in-law has never had an allergic reaction in the 10 years I have known her. But Darius was panicking. He wasn't panicking about allergies. He was panicking because he thought he had just accidentally mass murdered his own family. "I am calling them now, Dad. Do not touch anything. I am coming over." He hung up. The line went dead. I sat there in the silence. I looked at the box. It was still sealed. The ribbon was untouched. Emily and the grandkids had not been here today. They were at school and work. They were safe. But my son didn't know that. For For 15 minutes I sat like a stone statue. I thought about the boy I used to carry on my shoulders at the zoo. I thought about the teenager I taught to drive in my old Ford truck. I thought about the man who stood at the altar with Emily promising to protect her. And now that same man was racing across Chicago thinking his wife and children were dead because of a trap he had set for me. The sound of tires screeching on the asphalt of my driveway broke my reverie. A car door slammed. Seconds later, my front door burst open. He didn't even knock. Darius ran into my study. He looked like a madman. His designer suit was rumpled, his tie-loose sweat pouring down his face despite the winter chill outside. His eyes were wild, darting around the room. "Where are they? Did you call the ambulance? Which hospital, Dad?" He rushed toward my desk, his hands shaking violently. He looked ready to vomit. I took a slow sip of my lukewarm tea. "Calm down, son. Calm down. You poisoned them. You gave them—" He stopped. He caught himself. The word poison hung in the air unspoken but loud as a gunshot. I pointed a single steady finger at the desk. "Look!" Darius froze. His eyes followed my finger. There, sitting on a stack of papers, was the red velvet box. The gold ribbon was perfect. The seal was unbroken. He stared at it. He blinked once, twice. His brain was trying to process the image. The box was here. I hadn't given it away. His knees gave out. He literally collapsed onto the Persian rug, gasping for air. It was a display of relief so profound it was pathetic. But let me be clear. He wasn't relieved because he loved his family. He was relieved because he wasn't going to prison for a triple homicide. He was relieved because the only person he had tried to kill was still the only person in the crosshairs. Me. Dad. You. You said— I leaned forward, my elbows on the desk. "I lied, Darius. I wanted to see your reaction." And that was quite a reaction for a box of chocolates. He scrambled to his feet, wiping the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. The panic was fading, replaced by a sudden, sharp anger. The anger of a con artist who realizes he has been played. "You are sick, old man. You are actually sick in the head. You made me think my family was dying. Who does that?" I watched him with cold eyes. Who sends a box of chocolates to a diabetic father and panics when he hears someone else ate them? He froze again. He licked his lips. His eyes darted to the box, then to the door. "I told you. Allergies. I was worried about Emily. You are getting senile, Dad, playing games like this. It is twisted." He reached out his hand. "Give me the box." I didn't move. "Why? It is obviously bad luck now. Or maybe it got too warm in the delivery truck. I do not want you eating stale candy. I will buy you something else. Just give it to me. I will throw it out on my way home." His hand hovered over the red velvet. He was going to take the evidence. He was going to walk out of here, destroy the box, and gaslight me into thinking I was the crazy one. My hand shot out. I grabbed his wrist. Darius gasped. He looked down at my hand, gripping his arm. He saw the veins, the age spots, the loose skin, but he also felt the grip. I worked construction for 20 years before I put on a suit. My grip is iron. My grip is the reason this family has money. Let go, Dad. You are hurting me. "Leave it," I said. My voice was low, a rumble from deep in my chest. "It is a gift, Darius. It would be rude to throw away a gift. I want to keep it. I want to look at it." We locked eyes. For the first time in years, he really looked at me. He didn't see the checkbook. He didn't see the obstacle. He saw Lucius King, and he saw that I knew. Fear flickered in his eyes. Real fear. Not the panic of an accident, but the fear of a predator who realizes the prey has teeth. "Fine," he spat, yanking his arm back. "Keep it. Rot with it for all I care. I have to go. I have to check on Emily myself since you are playing mind games." He backed away, straightening his jacket, trying to regain some shred of dignity. "You do that, son. Give Emily my love, and tell her I said the chocolates were to die for." He flinched. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the room. I heard his footsteps retreating down the hall, the front door slamming shut, the engine of his expensive sports car roaring to life. He was running away. I sat there for a long time. The house was quiet again. The winter sun slanted through the blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I looked at my hand, the one that had grabbed him. It was trembling slightly now. Not from fear, from rage, from a heartbreak so deep it felt like a physical wound. I had raised him. I had paid for his schools. I had bailed him out of trouble more times than I could count, and this was my return on investment. A box of poison wrapped in velvet. I reached for the phone again. I didn't call the police. Not yet. The police asked too many questions and they moved too slow. I needed answers first. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I dialed a number I hadn't called in a year. Dr. Vance. Vance and I go back to the playground. He grew up on the same block. He used his brain to become one of the best forensic toxicologists in the state. He runs an independent lab now. He is discreet. He is loyal. Lucius Vance answered on the second ring. Happy birthday, you old goat. How does 74 feel? It feels dangerous, Vance. His tone changed instantly. What is wrong? I need you to come over, now. Bring your kit. Are you hurt? No. But I have a box of chocolates here, and I think if I eat one I want C75. I will be there in 20 minutes. I hung up the phone. I stood up and walked to the window watching the empty street where my son had just fled. He thought he was smart. He thought he was desperate enough to do what needed to be done. But he forgot one thing. He forgot who taught him how to walk. He declared war on me today. He just didn't realize that I have been fighting wars since before he was born, and I have never, ever lost. The game had begun, and I was about to make the first move. Vance arrived 20 minutes later carrying a black leather bag that looked like it belonged to a country doctor from the turn of the century. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer pleasantries. He walked straight to my desk, put on a pair of latex gloves, and carefully opened the red velvet box. The smell of rich Belgian chocolate filled the room, sweet and cloying. It made my stomach turn. I watched him work. Vance is a man of science, precise and cold. He scraped a small sample from the center of the truffle, the one Darius had specifically told me to eat. He dissolved it in a solution, placed a drop on a slide, and peered through his portable microscope. He ran a chemical strip test. The silence in the room was heavy like the air before a thunderstorm. I poured 2 glasses of whiskey, one for me, one for him. I didn't drink mine. I just held the glass, feeling the cold crystal against my palm, anchoring me to reality. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, Vance sat back. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He didn't look at me. He looked at the glass of whiskey on the desk. Tell me, I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. It is digoxin lucius. The word hung in the air. I knew what it was. My late wife Viola had taken it for her heart condition years ago. It regulates the heartbeat, but in high doses it stops it. How much, I asked. Vance picked up the whiskey and downed it in one swallow. Enough. If you had eaten that truffle, you would have felt a little nauseous at first, maybe some confusion. Then your heart would have started to flutter. You would have gone to lie down, and you would never have woken up. He looked at me, then his eyes full of a pity I didn't want. It would have looked like a natural heart attack, Lucius. A man your age with your history of hypertension. No coroner would have looked twice unless they were looking for it. It is a clean kill. A clean kill. My son wanted a clean kill. I closed my eyes. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw Darius at 7 years old crying because he scraped his knee. I saw him at 16 beaming as I handed him the keys to his first car. I saw him at 25 standing in my office, head bowed, admitting he had gambled away his tuition money. I wrote the check that day. I wrote it without hesitation. I told him that everyone makes mistakes, that money is just paper, that family is what matters. I bailed him out. I saved him. I thought I was being a father. I thought I was teaching him that he had a safety net. I didn't realize I was teaching him that I was nothing more than a bank vault he could crack open whenever he needed cash. And now he decided it was time to make a final withdrawal. Vance stood up and started packing his gear. What are you going to do? Are we calling the cops? I opened my eyes. I looked at the red box. It looked so innocent. Just candy. Just a gift. No, I said. Not yet. Lucius, this is attempted murder. This is your son. Exactly. It is my son, which means I need to know why. I need to know what kind of desperation turns a man into a parricide. Darius is weak, Vance. He is greedy and he is lazy, but he isn't a killer by nature. Someone or something pushed him to this. I need to know what it is before I pull the trigger. Vance looked at me for a long moment. He knows me. He knows that once I make up my mind, the mountain doesn't move. Keep the box in the freezer, he said. If you change your mind, you will need the evidence. Watch your back, old friend. He left. The front door clicked shut, sealing me in with the silence and the smell of chocolate. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my chair watching the streetlights flicker outside. I thought about calling the police. I imagined Darius in handcuffs, his face pressed against the hood of a squad car. I imagined the trial, the headlines, real estate mogul poisoned by son. The shame of it burned my throat like bile. No. The police were a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. At 8 a.m., I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Ray. Ray is a private investigator who operates in the gray areas of the city. He used to be a forensic accountant before he realized there was more money in secrets than in audits. He doesn't have an office. He meets you in diners and parks. He doesn't ask moral questions. He just delivers facts. We met at a greasy spoon on the edge of town. I wore a baseball cap and sunglasses. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad movie, but I couldn't risk being seen. Darius might be watching, or whoever was pulling Darius's strings. Ray slid into the booth opposite me. He looked like a man who had slept in his clothes, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the room, checking the exits. "Mr. King," he said, "it has been a long time. You look like you have seen a ghost. I have seen worse, Ray. I need you to look into someone." "Who?" "My son, Darius." Ray didn't blink. He didn't look surprised. "In his line of work, family betrayals are just Tuesday. What am I looking for?" "Everything. Financials, associates, debts, secrets. I want to know who he talks to, where he sleeps, and how much money he owes. I want to know why he is desperate enough to do something stupid." Ray pulled a small notebook from his pocket. I heard he was running a construction firm. King Developments. "A shell," I spat. "He hasn't built a doghouse in 3 years. He lives off the allowance I give him and whatever scams he is running on the side. But he drives a Porsche and wears Italian suits. Find out who is paying for it, or who he is stealing it from." Ray nodded, scribbling something down. This kind of deep dive takes time and resources. I slid a thick envelope across the table. It was filled with cash. Untraceable. "Don't spare any expense. I need answers yesterday." Ray took the envelope, weighed it in his hand, and vanished it into his jacket. "Give me 48 hours. I went back home and waited. Those 48 hours were the longest of my life. I stayed in the house, lights off, watching the driveway. Every car that passed made me flinch. Was it Darius coming back to finish the job? Was it the police? Was it my own paranoia eating me alive? Darius called 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't talk to him. I couldn't hear his voice pretending to be my son while I knew he was my executioner. Emily called once. Her voice was sweet, concerned. "Dad, Darius said you weren't feeling well. Is everything okay? Can I bring you some soup?" I almost broke then. I almost told her everything. But I held back. I remembered the fear in Darius's voice when I said I gave the chocolates to her. He had panicked. He didn't want to kill her. That meant she didn't know. She was innocent. If I told her, she would confront him. And if she confronted a man desperate enough to kill his father, she might be next. "I am fine, honey," I texted back. "Just a flu. Need to sleep. Love you." 2 days later, Ray called. "Meet me. Same place." I got there 10 minutes early. Ray was already there nursing a black coffee. He looked tired. He looked worried. He didn't say a word until I sat down. He pushed a manila folder across the table. It was thin. Too thin. "Mr. King," he said, his voice low, "you are not going to like this. Tell me, your son isn't just broke. He is underwater. He is drowning." I opened the folder. It was a single sheet of paper with a list of names and numbers. The numbers were staggering. $3 million. "He has been gambling," Ray said. "High-stakes poker, sports betting, crypto scams. He chased losses with bigger bets. He borrowed from banks until they cut him off. Then he borrowed from friends. Then he borrowed from people who aren't friends." I looked at the names on the list. One name stood out. It wasn't a bank. It was a nickname. "The Butcher." "Who is this?" I asked, pointing at the name. "That is the problem," Ray said. "That is the MCN Organization, Eastern European mob. They run the underground casinos in the warehouse district. Darius owes them $2 million. My hand tightened on the paper. $2 million. To the mob. Ray leaned in closer. I spoke to a contact. "Darius has been dodging them for a month. They grabbed him last week. They didn't break his legs. They gave him a deadline." "A deadline." "Yes. They told him he has 14 days to come up with the full amount. If he doesn't pay, they are not going to kill him. They said they would kill his wife, then his kids." and they would make him watch before they ended him. The world tilted on its axis. 14 days. That was why. That was the desperation. He wasn't just trying to get rich. He was trying to save his family. But to save them, he had to sacrifice me. He needs your trust fund, Ray said. He knows the terms. If you die, the trust dissolves and the assets transfer to him immediately. It is the only way he can get that kind of cash fast enough. How many days left, I asked. Ray checked his watch. 7. He used the first week trying to find another way. The chocolate was his Hail Mary. He is running out of time, Lucius, and a man running out of time is the most dangerous thing in the world. I sat back against the vinyl booth. 7 days. My son had 7 days to kill me or his family would die. He failed with the poison. He knows it didn't work. He thinks I threw it away. He thinks he dodged a bullet. But the clock is still ticking for him. He is going to try again, Ray said. He has to. He doesn't have a choice. You need to go to the police. You need protection. No. Lucius, these are professional killers. No police. If the police get involved, the Surkovs will know. They will kill Emily and the kids just to tie up loose ends. They will burn everything down. Then what are you going to do? You can't fight the mob and your son at the same time. I looked at the folder. I looked at the name The Butcher. I am not going to fight them, Ray. I am going to use them. My son thinks he is playing a game. He thinks he is the player. He doesn't realize he is just a pawn, and it is time for the king to clear the board. I stood up. I took the folder. Keep watching him, Ray. I need to know his every move. If he sneezes, I want to know who handed him a tissue. I walked out of the diner into the cold gray light of the afternoon. I had 7 days. 7 days to save my grandkids, save my daughter-in-law, and punish the son who betrayed me. I wasn't going to die. Not today. Not in 7 days. I was Lucius King. I built skyscrapers out of mud. I could build a trap out of lies. Darius wanted my money. He was going to get it. But he was going to wish he had never touched a dime. I invited the wolf to dinner. It is an old strategy one I learned back when I was negotiating land deals with men who carried pistols in their ankle holsters. If you want to understand your enemy, you do not watch him from a distance. You bring him to your table. You break bread with him. You watch how he holds his knife. You watch what he looks at when he thinks you are not paying attention. 3 days had passed since the chocolate incident. 3 days since Ray told me about the debt, the mob, and the clock ticking down on my life. Darius was desperate. Desperation makes a man sloppy, but it also makes him fast. I couldn't just sit in my fortress waiting for the next attack. I needed to open the drawbridge. I called him on a Tuesday afternoon. I kept my voice weary, the voice of a father who was getting too old for this world. I told him I wanted to see him and Emily. I told him I wanted to have a family dinner, just like the old days. I heard the hesitation in his voice, the paranoia. He was wondering if I knew. He was wondering if the police were waiting in the dining room, but his greed and his fear of the people he owed money to won out. He accepted. I spent the afternoon preparing. I didn't just cook. I didn't just roast a leg of lamb and open a bottle of vintage Cabernet. I prepared the house. I installed 3 new pinhole cameras, one in the hallway, one in the dining room chandelier, and one, the most important one, inside the medicine cabinet in the guest bathroom. I knew my son. I knew his bladder was weak when he was nervous, and I knew that if he was going to make a move, he would need a moment of privacy. They arrived at 7. The winter wind blew them through the door, bringing a chill into the foyer that had nothing to do with the weather. Darius looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes darting around the corners of the room as if expecting an ambush. He wore a sweater that cost $600, but he looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Then there was Emily, my daughter-in-law, the woman I had suspected of conspiring to kill me. She walked in behind him, her head lowered. She was a small woman, pale and delicate, usually full of nervous energy and chatter. Tonight she was a ghost. She wore a long-sleeved turtleneck despite the heat blasting in the house. She didn't look me in the eye. She murmured a hello and immediately busied herself with hanging up coats, making herself small, trying to disappear. I poured the wine. I watched them. Darius drank his first glass in 2 swallows. He poured a second before I had even sat down. "So, Dad," he said, his voice too loud in the quiet room. "What is the occasion? You usually hate dinner parties." I settled into the head of the table. I looked at my rough, scarred hands resting on the white tablecloth. No occasion, I said slowly. Just thinking. A man gets to be 74, he starts thinking about legacy. He starts thinking about what he leaves behind. The word legacy hung in the air. I saw Darius stiffen, his eyes locked onto mine, hungry and terrified at the same time. This was the bait. We ate in a silence that was only broken by the scrape of cutlery on porcelain. I kept the conversation steering toward the past. I talked about the buildings I built in the 90s. I talked about the mistakes I made. I talked about money. You know, I said cutting a piece of lamb. I have been holding on to the trust fund too tight. I have been afraid that you weren't ready, Darius. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm just being a stubborn old man. Darius stopped chewing. He looked at Emily, then back at me. A sheen of sweat appeared on his upper lip. What are you saying, Dad? I am saying that I am tired. I am saying that maybe it is time to sign the papers. Maybe it is time to hand over the keys to the kingdom. It was a lie. A magnificent, beautiful lie. But Darius swallowed it whole. I saw the hope flare in his eyes, followed immediately by a darker emotion. Regret. Or maybe panic. Because if I signed the papers tomorrow, he wouldn't need to kill me. But he had already set wheels in motion that he couldn't stop. The mob doesn't wait for probate courts. The mob wanted their money yesterday. Emily didn't react to the news of the money. She didn't smile. She didn't squeeze his hand. She dropped her fork. It clattered onto her plate, a harsh sound. She flinched, physically recoiling as if she expected a blow. I am so sorry, she whispered, reaching for the fork. Her hand shook. As she reached out, the sleeve of her turtleneck rode up her arm. Just an inch. But an inch was enough. I saw it. Dark purple and ugly against her pale skin. A bruise. But not just a bruise. It was the shape of fingers. 4 distinct marks on the top of her wrist, one on the bottom. Someone had grabbed her. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to crush the blood vessels. She saw me looking. Her eyes went wide with terror. She yanked her sleeve down, covering the mark, and looked immediately at Darius. Darius wasn't looking at her wrist. He was looking at her face with a glare so venomous it could have peeled paint. It was a look of warning, a look of ownership. In that split second, the puzzle pieces clicked into place. The silence, the long sleeves, the fear in her eyes when I mentioned the chocolates the other day. Emily wasn't his partner. She was his hostage. He was hurting her. He was terrorizing her to keep her in line, to keep her quiet about the debts, about the people coming to their door. She wasn't trying to kill me. She was trying to survive him. A cold rage colder than the Chicago winter settled in my gut. It took every ounce of discipline I had not to reach across the table and break my son's jaw. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I acted now, if I exposed him without the final nail in the coffin, he would hurt her again. He might kill her just to spite me. I took a breath. I forced a smile onto my face. "Are you cold, Emily?" I asked. "You are shivering." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "A little." Darius laughed. It was a hollow barking sound. "She is always cold, Dad. Poor circulation." "Isn't that right, Em?" "Yes," she whispered. "Poor circulation." I went back to my meal, but my senses were dialed up to 11. I was no longer having dinner with my son. I was sitting across from a monster. And monsters always make mistakes when they think they are winning. The dinner dragged on. I spun tales of lawyers and bank transfers, feeding Darius the illusion that his salvation was just a signature away. He relaxed. He drank more wine. He started to believe that he might get out of this alive. Then it happened. "Excuse me," Darius said, pushing his chair back. "Too much wine. Nature calls." He stood up a little unsteady and walked toward the hallway. "Take your time," I said. As soon as he turned the corner, I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had the app open. I had the feed from the bathroom camera live on my screen. I watched him enter the small guest bathroom. He didn't go to the toilet. He didn't wash his hands. He went straight to the mirror. He looked at himself for a second, adjusting his tie, breathing hard. He looked like a man on the edge of a cliff. Then he opened the medicine cabinet. My heart stopped. I knew my medicine cabinet. It was filled with the standard pills of an old man. Blood pressure medication, cholesterol pills, aspirin. Darius reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small amber vial. It looked like a standard prescription bottle, but the label had been peeled off. He worked quickly. He scanned the shelves until he found my heart medication. The digoxin, the same drug he had put in the chocolate. But this wasn't chocolate. He opened my bottle of pills. He opened his unmarked vial, and with shaking hands he swapped them. He poured my real pills into his pocket. Then he poured the contents of the unmarked vial into my prescription bottle. He screwed the cap back on. He placed the bottle back on the shelf exactly where it had been. He closed the cabinet door. On the screen I saw him smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just pulled the pin on a grenade and was walking away before the explosion. He flushed the toilet for the sound effect and washed his hands. He was washing away the guilt. He was washing away the evidence. I slid the phone back into my pocket just as he walked back into the dining room. He looked lighter. The weight was gone from his shoulders. He sat down and picked up his wine glass. "Everything okay, Dad?" he asked. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had just swapped my life-saving medicine for poison right here in my own house while his battered wife sat next to him. "Everything is fine, Darius," I said. "I was just telling Emily that I think I will take my medication early tonight. I am feeling a little tired." Darius froze mid-sip. His eyes lit up. "You should, Dad. You should take care of your heart. We want you around for a long time." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but I smiled. "Yes, son, a long time." I knew then exactly what I had to do. The game was no longer about teaching him a lesson. It was about survival. He had planted the bomb. Now I had to make sure he was the one holding it when it went off. Darius did not wait long to make his next move. He was like a gambler on a losing streak who decides to double down on a bad hand. The morning after the dinner, the morning after he swapped my heart medication for poison, he was back on my doorstep. But he wasn't alone. He brought a woman with him. She was tall, with hair dyed a shade of blonde that didn't exist in nature, and a uniform that looked like she had bought it at a costume shop. She stood a step behind him, clutching a large tote bag, her eyes scanning my porch like she was pricing the bricks. Dad Darius said, his voice full of that fake concern that was starting to grate on my nerves like sandpaper. "We need to talk. I was up all night worrying about you. You seemed so confused at dinner. The memory lapses, the shaking. I can't leave you alone here." I leaned against the door frame, letting my shoulders slump. I let my mouth hang open just a fraction. I was giving him exactly what he wanted to see, an old man fading away. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice raspy. "This is Brenda Darius," said, placing a hand on the small of her back. "A touch too familiar for an employer and an employee. She is a private nurse, the best in the city. I hired her to look after you, Dad, just for a few weeks, until you get your strength back." Brenda stepped forward. She smelled of cheap vanilla perfume and cigarettes masked by mint gum. "Hello, Mr. King," she said. Her voice was syrup poured over gravel. "I am here to take care of everything. You won't have to lift a finger." I looked at her. I looked at my son. It was a pincer move. He had planted the bomb, and now he was leaving a guard dog to make sure I didn't defuse it. If I refused, he would push for guardianship immediately. He would say I was refusing medical care. If I accepted, I was letting a viper into my bed. I looked at Brenda again. There was a hardness around her eyes that the smile couldn't hide. She wasn't a nurse. She was a cleaner. I shuffled back, opening the door wide. "Well," I said, "if you think it is best, son. I have been feeling mighty tired lately." Darius exhaled. The tension drained from his shoulders. He thought he had won. He thought the fortress had fallen. "Good, Dad. That is good. Brenda will stay in the guest room. She will handle your meals, your meds, everything." He left 20 minutes later, practically skipping down the driveway. He left me alone with the stranger in my house. Brenda wasted no time. She marched into the kitchen and started opening cupboards, moving things around, establishing dominance. She made me a cup of tea. I took it, thanked her, and poured it into the potted fern when she turned her back. I retreated to my study and locked the door. I needed to know who I was dealing with. I texted Ray the license plate number of the car she had arrived in, which I had noted while Darius was saying his goodbyes. 2 hours later, Ray called. His voice was tight. "Lucius, get her out of there. Tell me," I said. "Her name is Brenda Miller. She is not a registered nurse. She lost her license 5 years ago for stealing opioids from a hospice center. Since then, she has been floating. 2 arrests for fraud, both dismissed for lack of evidence. She targets widowers Lucius, She moves in, gets them to sign over power of attorney, and then they tend to have accidents. I felt a cold shiver, but it wasn't fear. It was the thrill of the hunt. And Darius. Ray let out a humorless laugh. That is the kicker. She isn't just a hire. My guys spotted them 3 weeks ago at a motel off I-90. They were arguing in the parking lot. Then they were kissing. She is his mistress, Lucius. He brought his mistress into your house to kill you. I hung up the phone. It made perfect sense. Darius was weak. He needed someone to hold his hand while he pulled the trigger. He brought in a professional. I unlocked the study door and walked out. It was time to put on a show. I found Brenda in the living room. She was looking at the silver candlesticks on the mantel, weighing one in her hand. When she saw me, she jumped quickly, putting it back. "Mr. King," she said, smoothing her uniform. "You startled me. Time for your afternoon pills." I shuffled toward her, dragging my left foot slightly. I looked at her with vacant eyes. "Who are you again?" I asked. "Did Viola send you?" Her eyes lit up. She saw a senile old fool. She saw a payday. "No, honey," she cooed. "Viola didn't send me. Darius did. Come on now." She led me to the kitchen. The pill organizer was on the counter, the one Darius had tampered with. But Brenda wasn't satisfied with his work. I watched her through half-closed eyes as I pretended to look for a glass of water. She stood with her back to me, blocking my view of the counter, but she forgot about the reflection in the microwave door. I saw her open the organizer. I saw her take the pills from Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. She didn't put them in a cup. She put them all into the slot for today. Monday. She was tripling the dose. Darius had swapped the pills for poison. Brenda was making sure I took enough to kill a horse. She wasn't taking any chances. She wanted this over fast. She turned around, a smile plastered on her face, holding a small paper cup filled with death. "Here we go, Mr. King," she said. "Open wide. This will make you feel so much better." I looked at the cup. I looked at her. I reached out a trembling hand and took it. "Thank you, nurse," I mumbled. "You are too kind to an old man." I raised the cup to my lips. She watched me. Her breath held her eyes hungry. She was waiting for the swallow. She was waiting for the end. But I wasn't ready to die. I was just ready to start the game. I pretended to cough a violent hacking fit. I covered my mouth with a napkin, spitting the pills into the folds of the paper while my body shook with the force of the act. "Oh, dear," Brenda said, patting my back with a hand that felt like a claw. "Get it down now." I wiped my mouth, checking to make sure the pills were hidden. I swallowed it. I wheezed. "Thank you," she smiled. It was the smile of a butcher looking at a lamb. "You just go rest now, Mr. King. I will be right here." I walked away, clutching the napkin in my pocket. My heart was racing, but my mind was ice cold. They wanted to play doctor, fine. But they forgot that I was the one who built the hospital. The intruder was in, the trap was set, and tomorrow I was going to make them wish they had never knocked on my door. I woke up to the smell of rotten eggs. It was thick, heavy, and suffocating, crawling under the crack of my bedroom door like a silent assassin. In my line of work, you learn to recognize that smell instantly. It is mercaptan, the chemical additive they put in natural gas so you know when you are about to die. I sat up in bed, my heart kicking against my ribs. My first instinct was to panic, to run, but I forced myself to freeze. I forced my lungs to take shallow breaths. I am 74 years old, but my mind is a steel trap. I cooked dinner last night. I made tea. I wiped the stove down with a damp cloth. I checked the knobs. I always check the knobs. It is a habit from 40 years of building houses where a single loose fitting could cost millions in lawsuits. I did not leave the gas on. Someone else did. I slid out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. I didn't turn on the light. A spark could be fatal if the concentration was high enough. I moved through the darkness of my own home, a ghost haunting the halls I had built. I reached the kitchen. The hissing sound was unmistakable. It was the sound of a snake in the grass. I held my breath and walked to the stove. 3 burners were turned on full blast but unlit. The pilot light had been blown out. Gas was pouring into the room, filling the space with explosive potential. I reached out and twisted the knobs off. 1, 2, 3. The hissing stopped. The silence rushed back in, ringing in my ears. I went to the window and cracked it open just an inch. Enough to let the poison out, but not enough to clear the smell entirely. I needed the smell. The smell was my prop. I retreated to my study, locking the door behind me. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. I scrolled back the footage to 3:14 a.m. The screen glowed in the dark room. There she was. Brenda. She wasn't wearing her nurse uniform. She was wearing a silk robe that I suspect she stole from my late wife's closet. She walked into the kitchen with a purpose. She didn't get a glass of water. She didn't make a sandwich. She walked straight to the stove. I watched in high definition as she leaned over and blew out the pilot light. I watched her turn the knobs one by one. She stood there for a moment, inhaling the gas like it was perfume, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. Then she turned to the hook by the door, where I keep my keys, my truck keys, the keys to my freedom. She took them. She didn't put them in her pocket. She walked over to the refrigerator, opened the door, and placed my keys on the shelf next to the milk. She closed the fridge. She looked around the kitchen one last time, satisfied with her work, and went back to bed. I sat there in the dark, staring at the phone. Cold rage washed over me. This wasn't just attempted murder. This was psychological warfare. It is called gaslighting. They were trying to make me doubt my own reality. They wanted me to believe I was the danger. They wanted to prove I was incompetent, senile, a confused old man who couldn't be trusted with a stove, let alone a multi-million-dollar estate. They wanted to break my mind before they stopped my heart. Well, two can play at that game. I waited until 7 a.m. I waited until the sun was just starting to bleed through the curtains. I let the smell of gas linger in the hallways. Then I started the show. I ran out of my study, stumbling into the hallway. I started screaming. Fire! Fire! Help me! I coughed, hacking loudly, making it sound like my lungs were burning. I banged on the walls. Brenda! Brenda, where are you? The house is exploding. Her door flew open. She came running out, feigning sleepiness, her eyes wide with fake alarm. Mr. King, what is it? What is wrong? The gas, I wheezed, clutching my chest. I smell gas. I think I left it on. I think I am going to die. She rushed past me into the kitchen. She made a big show of checking the stove. Oh my God, Mr. King, she shouted. The burners were on. All of them. Did you try to cook breakfast in the middle of the night? I leaned against the doorframe, letting my hands tremble. I don't know, I stammered. I don't remember. I went to bed. I swear I went to bed. She walked back to me, shaking her head, a look of pity and condescension plastered on her face. You must have forgotten Lucius. This is dangerous. You could have killed us both. Maybe it is not safe for you to use the kitchen anymore. She was good. I had to give her that. She was very good. I need to get out, I said, panic rising in my voice. I need fresh air. Where are my keys? I need to drive. I patted my pockets frantically. I looked at the hook by the door. Empty. My keys. They are gone. Someone took my keys. Brenda sighed. A long, suffering sigh. Mr. King, you probably misplaced them. You were very confused last night. You were wandering around. No. They are always on the hook. You took them. Me, she asked, her voice dripping with offense. Why would I take your keys? Let's look for them. She led me around the kitchen, playing the game of hot and cold. She looked in the drawers. She looked under the table. Then she opened the refrigerator. Mr. King, she said softly, look here. I looked. There were my keys sitting next to the carton of milk, cold and condemning. I stared at them, letting my jaw drop. I let my eyes fill with tears of confusion and fear. Why are they in the fridge? I whispered. Brenda put a hand on my shoulder. It felt like a spider landing on my skin. You put them there, Lucius. You must have. You are getting worse. It is okay. We can handle this. I grabbed the keys, my hands shaking violently. I am losing my mind, Brenda. I am going crazy. I don't remember any of this. You should call Darius, she suggested gently. He needs to know. He will know what to do. Yes, I said. Yes. Darius. I need my son. I pulled out my phone and dialed Darius. I put it on speaker so she could hear. Dad Darius answered on the first ring. It was too early for him. He was waiting for the call. Son. I sobbed into the phone. "You have to come over. Something is wrong with me." I tried to blow up the house. I put my keys in the fridge. I don't know who I am anymore. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end, but it wasn't fear. It was excitement. "Stay there, Dad. Do not move. I am coming right now." He hung up. I sank into a kitchen chair, burying my face in my hands. Brenda stood over me, rubbing my back, making soothing noises. "It is for the best, Mr. King," she cooed. "You need help. You can't live like this." I rocked back and forth, mumbling to myself, but inside my mind was razor sharp. I was recording everything. The camera in the ceiling fixture was capturing every second of her performance. The audio recorder in my pocket was picking up every lie. They thought they were gaslighting me. They thought they were driving me insane. But they were just writing their own confessions. Darius arrived in record time. He must have been parked around the corner. He burst through the door, still wearing the same clothes from yesterday. He looked wired. "Dad!" he shouted, rushing into the kitchen. I looked up at him. I made sure I looked broken. I made sure I looked like a man who had lost his grip on reality. "Darius," I whispered, "I am scared. I don't know what is happening to me." He didn't hug me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't check the stove. He looked at Brenda. Their eyes met over my slumped shoulders. It was a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. It was the look of two conspirators who realized their plan had worked perfectly. Brenda gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Darius smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a smirk, a cold, cruel twist of the lips that revealed everything. He walked over to Brenda and placed a hand on her arm. He squeezed it. "Is he stable?" he asked her, speaking about me as if I were a piece of furniture. "He is confused," Brenda replied, her voice professional and detached. "But he is calm now. He understands that he can't be alone." Darius looked down at me. He didn't see his father. He saw a signature on a check. He saw a problem that had finally solved itself. "Don't worry, Dad," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "We are going to take care of everything. You won't have to worry about anything ever again." He leaned in close to Brenda, thinking I was too far gone to hear, too lost in my dementia to understand. "Good work," he whispered to her. She smiled back at him. "It is almost over, baby," he said. I froze. My heart stopped beating for a second. "Baby." He called her baby. In my kitchen, over my head. "It is almost over." I kept my head down. I let out a whimper of distress, but under the table my fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. He was right. It was almost over. But not the way he thought. He thought he had broken me. He thought he had won. He didn't know that I had the footage. He didn't know I had the toxicology report. And he didn't know that the old man sitting in the chair weeping for his lost mind was actually plotting the most devastating checkmate of his life. I looked up at him through my tears. "Thank you, son," I said. "Thank you for being here." "You are welcome, Dad," he said, patting my head like a dog. "Now let's get you some water. We have a lot of paperwork to do today." Paperwork. He was going for the power of attorney. He was going for the kill. I took the water Brenda handed me. I drank it. It tasted like victory. "You want to play games, son," I thought. "You want to play with my mind? Fine, let's play. But when the game is over, only one of us is going to be left standing, and it won't be the one who puts his father's keys in the fridge." I waited until Brenda was distracted. It was 2 p.m, and she was sitting in the living room watching a soap opera. Her feet up on my coffee table, a glass of my iced tea in her hand. She thought I was in my bedroom taking a nap, sedated by the extra pills she had tried to force down my throat at lunch. She didn't know I had cheeked them and flushed them down the toilet. She was arrogant, and arrogance makes you sloppy. I slipped out the back door, moving through the garden I had planted with viola 30 years ago. I climbed the back fence, my old joints protesting, but the adrenaline numbing the pain. Ray was waiting for me 2 streets over in a nondescript gray sedan. He didn't say a word as I got in. He just handed me a file and started the engine. We tracked her to a supermarket on the north side of town. It was a cheaper grocery store, the kind where the lights hum too loud and the floors are always sticky. I watched from the car as Emily walked in. She looked small, defeated. She was pushing a cart with a wonky wheel, her shoulders hunched as if she expected the sky to fall on her at any moment. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. "Give me 10 minutes, I told Ray. "If I'm not out in 20, come get me." I walked into the store. The air smelled of bleach and old produce. I found her in the cereal aisle. She was staring at a box of generic cornflakes, comparing the price to the brand name, counting pennies in her head. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide, and she was wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite the humidity, hiding bruises. I stepped up beside her. "Hello, Emily." She jumped so hard she knocked the box of cereal off the shelf. It hit the floor with a hollow thud. She spun around, her eyes wide with terror. When she saw it was me, the fear didn't leave. It changed. It became panic. "Dad," she stammered, backing away until she hit the shelving unit. What are you doing here? You are supposed to be at home. You are sick." "I am not sick, Emily, and I am not crazy. Please," she whispered, looking around frantically to see if anyone was watching. "Please, just go. If Darius knows I talked to you, if he knows you are here." She tried to push past me, abandoning her cart. She was ready to run. She was terrified of her own husband. That realization made my blood boil, but I kept my voice calm. I needed to be the anchor, not the storm. I blocked her path gently. I didn't touch her. I just stood there, a solid wall of presence. "He won't know," I said, "unless you tell him. And you are not going to tell him because I am the only person who can save you from him." She stopped. Her chest was heaving. "Save me. You can't even save yourself. You are confused, Lucius. Darius says you are losing your mind. He says you tried to blow up the house." I looked her dead in the eye. Darius is a liar. I reached into my jacket pocket. Emily flinched, raising her hands as if to ward off a blow. It broke my heart. My son had turned this vibrant, intelligent woman into a frightened animal. I pulled out the envelope Ray had given me. I didn't hand it to her. I opened it. I pulled out the first photo. "Look," I commanded. She looked. It was a high-resolution shot taken 3 days ago. Darius and Brenda sitting at a bistro table downtown. They weren't discussing my medical care. Darius was laughing, his head thrown back. Brenda's hand was on his thigh. They looked like a couple in love. They looked like they didn't have a care in the world. Emily stared at the photo. Her breath hitched. "Who is that?" she whispered. "That is the nurse," I said. "The woman he hired to take care of his dying father. Her name is Brenda. She is a con artist. And she has been sleeping with your husband for 6 months. I pulled out another photo. This one was taken outside a jewelry store. Darius was fastening a diamond necklace around Brenda's neck, a necklace that cost more than the car Emily was driving. Emily made a sound that wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of something shattering. She grabbed the photo from my hand, staring at it as if she could burn a hole through the paper with her eyes. "He told me he was broke," she said, her voice trembling. "He told me we had no money. He made me sell my grandmother's ring to pay the electric bill. He said he was doing everything for us. He is doing everything for himself, Emily. He is gambling with your life. He is gambling with my life. And he is winning because we are letting him." She looked up at me then. The fear was still there, but the confusion was gone. In its place was a raw, agonizing pain. "Why are you showing me this, Lucius? To hurt me? No. To wake you up." I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "I know about the bruises, Emily. I know he hurts you. I saw your wrist at dinner." She instinctively grabbed her left arm, covering it. Tears began to spill over her lashes, tracking through her foundation. He gets so angry," she whispered. "He says it is the stress. He says if I just supported him more, if I just signed the papers, everything would be okay." "What papers, Emily?" She looked around the aisle again. We were alone, surrounded by colorful boxes of sugar and grain. "Loan papers," she confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "He made me co-sign. He took out loans in my name. He said it was for a construction project. But there is no project, is there?" "No," I said. "There is no project. There is only debt. He owes the wrong people, Emily. He owes the kind of people who don't send letters. They send men with baseball bats." She slumped against the shelves, sliding down until she was crouching on the linoleum floor. She put her head in her hands. "Oh, God," he said. "He said if I left him, he would take the kids. He said he would tell the court I was an unfit mother. He said he would destroy me. He can't take the kids where he is going," I said grimly. I knelt down beside her. I didn't care about my knees. I didn't care about my dignity. I cared about the woman who was the mother of my grandchildren. Listen to me, Emily. I am not senile. I am not sick. I am fighting a war, and I need a soldier inside the house. She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. What can I do? He watches me. He tracks my phone. You don't have to fight him, I said. You just have to watch him. I need to know his next move. I need to know when he gets desperate. Because a desperate man makes mistakes. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a burner phone. It was small, cheap, and untraceable. Take this. Hide it. Do not use it unless it is an emergency. Do not call me. Text me. Tell me what they are saying. Tell me what Brenda is doing. She took the phone, her hands shaking. She looked at it as if it were a grenade. He is going to kill you, Lucius, she whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He tried once with the chocolate, I said. He tried again with the gas. He will try a third time, and when he does, I need you to be the witness. I need you to be the one who opens the door when the police come. I helped her stand up. She looked fragile, like a strong wind could blow her away, but I saw a spark in her eyes. It was the spark of a mother who realizes her cubs are in danger. I will do it, she said. For the kids. For the kids, I agreed. She wiped her face, trying to compose herself. She looked at her cart at the cheap cereal and the bruised apples. There is one more thing, she said. Her voice was steadier now. Cold. What is it? I heard them talking last night. Darius and that woman. They thought I was asleep. What did they say? Darius was bragging. He was laughing. He said he finally found a broker who didn't ask questions. A broker for what? Insurance, Emily said. And then she dropped the bomb that turned my blood to ice. He bought a policy, Lucius. A new life insurance policy. On you. It is worth $5 million. And the beneficiary isn't the family. It isn't the trust. Who is it? I demanded. It is a company, she said. King Holdings, LLC. I closed my eyes. King Holdings. A shell company. A ghost. If he had a policy that meant the clock had sped up. You don't buy insurance on a building unless you plan to burn it down. And you don't buy insurance on a man unless you know exactly when he is going to die. He forged your signature, Emily said. I saw the papers in his briefcase. The policy goes into effect in 48 hours. 48 hours. That was the timeline. That was the deadline. He wasn't waiting for the mob anymore. He was making his own schedule. Thank you, Emily, I said. You just saved my life. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw the woman my son had fallen in love with before he let the darkness take him. She was brave. Go, I said. Buy your groceries. Go home. Act normal. Be the scared wife he wants you to be, but keep your eyes open. She nodded. She turned and walked away, pushing the squeaky cart down the aisle. She didn't look back. I walked out to the car. Ray looked at me in the rearview mirror. Well, he bought a policy, Ray. $5 million. Effective in 2 days. Ray let out a low whistle. That explains the rush. He is doubling down. Drive, I said. I have to make a call. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I looked at my watch. 48 hours. The game had changed. It wasn't just defense anymore. It was a race. Darius was betting $5 million that I would be dead by Friday. I was betting everything I had that he would be in handcuffs. I dialed Vance. Get the guest room ready, I said. I might need a place to die. Because if Darius wanted a death, I was going to give him one. Just not the one he expected. The phone on my desk buzzed at 11 a.m. It was a text from Ray. It was short, brutal, and told me everything I needed to know about the animal pacing in my living room. The butcher raised the vig. He needs 50 grand by sunset just to cover the interest. If he doesn't pay, they take a finger. I looked at the screen, then I looked at the closed door of my study. My son Darius was on the other side. He had been there for an hour, pacing back and forth on the hard wood, his footsteps heavy and erratic. He smelled of fear. It is a specific scent, sour and metallic, like old copper coins. He was trapped. The walls were closing in on him, and he was running out of air. 10 minutes ago, my private banker, Mr. Henderson, had called me. He sounded apologetic but firm. Mr. King, he had said, I'm afraid we had to decline a wire transfer request this morning. It came from your trust account. The signature looked... Well, it looked like yours, but the security token was missing. I had gripped the receiver tight. Who authorized it? Your son, sir. He came into the branch. He said you were ill. He had a power of attorney document. It looked forged, Lucius. The notary stamp was smeared. We escorted him out, but he made a scene. He was screaming about it being his money. I told Henderson to freeze everything. I told him to flag any activity from Darius as fraud. I didn't tell him to call the police. Not yet. The police would put Darius in a cell safe from the mob. I needed him desperate. I needed him in the wild. Now Darius was in my house. He had come straight from the bank failure to me. He was desperate, he was dangerous, and he was about to walk into a trap that would seal his fate. I opened the top drawer of my desk. Inside, nestled between a stack of blueprints and my revolver, was a blue bank book. It looked old. It looked official. It was a fake. My lawyer Goldberg had prepared it yesterday on my instructions. It was a masterpiece of forgery. It showed a savings account at a private, offshore bank in the Caymans. The balance printed on the last line was $5 million. Liquid, accessible, no trust fund rules, no board of trustees, just cash waiting for a PIN code. I stood up. My knees popped. I felt every one of my 74 years, but my mind was sharp. I walked over to the wall safe hidden behind the oil painting of the Chicago skyline. It was a painting Darius hated. He said it was old-fashioned. He didn't know it guarded the only things I truly valued. I took the painting down. I spun the dial of the safe. I set the combination back to my birthday. Darius knew my birthday. He used it for his own passwords. He was lazy like that. I placed the blue bank book inside the safe right on top of a stack of cash I kept for emergencies. I positioned it so the balance was visible, $5 million. Then I closed the safe door, but I didn't spin the dial. I left it unlocked, just barely engaged. I hung the painting back up, but I left it crooked, just an inch off center. It would bother him. Darius was obsessive about appearances. He would notice. I sat back down at my desk and pressed the intercom button. Send him in. The door flew open before I even finished the sentence. Darius stormed in. He looked like a man who had been running for days. His eyes were bloodshot. His tie was gone, and his expensive suit was stained with sweat. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking. "We need to talk. Now." I looked at him over the rim of my reading glasses. I kept my face impassive. "Stone, I heard you went to the bank, Darius." He froze. He licked his lips. Yeah, I did. I was trying to help you. I was trying to move some funds to a higher yield account. Brenda said your medical bills are going to be high." Lies. Always lies. He couldn't tell the truth if his life depended on it. And right now, his life did depend on it. "Mr. Henderson said you tried to forge my signature," I said calmly. "He said you tried to steal $200,000. "Steal," Darius shouted, slamming his hand on my desk. "It is my money. It is the family trust. I am the beneficiary. I needed a loan, Dad. A bridge loan. My business. I have a liquidity crunch." "You have a gambling debt," I said. The room went silent. Darius stared at me. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like wet dough. "How?" "Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that I am cutting you off. No more loans, no more bailouts, and definitely no access to the trust." Darius looked at me with pure hatred. "You can't do that. I need that money. They will—" He stopped. He couldn't say it. He couldn't admit that he had sold his soul to the butcher. "They will what, Darius? Break your legs. Kill you." He didn't answer. He started to pace again, running his hands through his hair. He looked like a caged animal. "I have a meeting with Goldberg tomorrow," I said, dropping the first part of the bait. "We are restructuring the estate. I am donating the bulk of the liquid assets to the community center." Darius stopped pacing. He spun around. "You are giving my inheritance away." "It is not your inheritance until I die," I said. "And since I plan on living a long time, I am going to put that money to good use. I am emptying the accounts, Darius. Tomorrow." This was the pressure point. I gave him a deadline. Tomorrow. If he wanted the money, he had to act before tomorrow. He looked at me, his chest heaving. "You are a selfish old man. You would rather give money to strangers than save your own son." "I would rather give money to strangers than feed it to bookies and thugs," I retorted. "Get out of my office. I need to prepare for the meeting." I turned my chair away from him, facing the window. I dismissed him. It was the ultimate insult. I heard him breathing behind me, heavy, ragged breaths. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking about the lamp on the table. He was thinking about smashing it over my head right then and there. But he didn't. He was a coward. He needed a plan. He needed to be sure. "I am going to the bathroom," he muttered. He walked out. I waited 5 seconds. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. I had a camera pointed directly at the safe. I watched on the screen as Darius walked back into the room. He was silent. He had taken off his shoes. He crept across the rug like a thief. He looked at my chair. From his angle, he could only see the back of my head. He thought I was asleep or reading. He moved to the painting. He saw it was crooked, just as I knew he would. He reached out and straightened it, but as he did, his hand brushed the safe dial. He felt it give. He froze. He looked at me again. I didn't move. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he moved the painting aside. He tried the handle. The safe opened. I held my breath. This was it. The moment of truth. Darius looked inside. He ignored the stack of cash. $5,000 was nothing to him now. He needed millions. His hand reached for the blue bank book. He opened it. I zoomed in on the camera feed. I saw his eyes widen. I saw the reflection of the number in his pupils. $5 million. He flipped through the pages. He saw the withdrawal codes. He saw that it was a bearer account. Whoever held the book and the code owned the money. A smile spread across his face. It was terrifying. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It was a smile of salvation. It was the smile of a man who just found a parachute in a burning plane. He looked at the back of my head again. I could feel his gaze burning into my skull. He put the book back. He closed the safe. He adjusted the painting. He didn't steal it. Why would he? If he stole it now, I would notice. I would call the bank. I would freeze it. No. He needed me dead. If I was dead, he could open the safe at his leisure. He could take the book. He could transfer the money before the body was even cold. And with $5 million, he could pay the butcher, pay Brenda, and live like a king. But he had to do it tonight. Before I met with Goldberg. Before I donated the money. He backed out of the room. He put his shoes back on in the hallway. I heard him walk to the kitchen. I heard him whispering to Brenda. "It is there," he hissed. I saw it. 5 million. Liquid. "Are you sure?" Brenda asked. I held it in my hands. "We have to move. Tonight. No more waiting. No more accidents. We end this tonight." "What about the policy?" Brenda asked. "Forget the insurance policy," Darius said. "This is cash. This is better. We do it tonight." The stairs. The stairs? So that was the plan. A fall. A tragic accident. An old man losing his footing in the dark. I heard the front door open and close. Darius was leaving. He was going to establish an alibi. He would come back later after the deed was done to play the grieving son. I turned my chair around. I looked at the crooked painting. He took the bait. He swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. I picked up my phone and texted Emily. "Tonight. The stairs. Be ready." Then I texted Ray. "He is coming. Don't stop him. Let him come." I stood up and walked to the safe. I took out the blue book and the cash. I put them in my pocket. I wasn't going to leave $5 million, even fake millions, lying around. I walked out of the study and looked at the grand staircase in the foyer. It was marble. Hard. Unforgiving. A fall from the top would break a neck easily. Brenda was in the kitchen humming to herself. She was probably looking for oil or grease, something to make the steps slippery. I walked up the stairs, my hand trailing on the banister. I went to my bedroom. I opened the closet and pulled out the dummy I had prepared. It was weighted. It was dressed in my favorite pajamas. Darius wanted a show. He wanted a tragedy. I was going to give him a performance that would bring the house down. But when the curtain fell, I wouldn't be the one in the body bag. Tonight the trap would snap shut, and my son would find out that the only thing harder than marble is the heart of a father who has been betrayed. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. It was holding its breath. I stood in the shadows of the second-floor landing, pressing my back against the cold plaster of the wall. I was wearing black, blending into the darkness of the home I had built with my own hands 30 years ago. Below me, the grand foyer stretched out a cavern of marble and shadow. The only light came from the street lamps outside, filtering through the transom window above the front door, casting long, skeletal shapes across the floor. I watched her. Brenda. She was on her hands and knees at the top of the staircase. She moved with a focused intensity like a woman scrubbing a floor, but she wasn't cleaning. In her hand, she held a bottle of my finest extra virgin olive oil. It was a bottle I had bought in Tuscany with Viola. Now it was a murder weapon. She poured the oil slowly, deliberately. She coated the top 3 steps, spreading the golden liquid with a rag until the marble glistened with a lethal sheen. She was thorough. She knew that friction was the only thing keeping an old man upright. Take away the friction and gravity does the rest. A fall from this height onto that unforgiving stone floor would shatter a hip, a spine, or a skull. It wasn't a maybe. It was physics. I checked my phone. A text from Emily. She is doing it now. I am in the guest room. I have the camera running. Good girl. Emily was hidden in the shadows of the downstairs hallway, her phone camera trained on the bottom of the stairs. She was terrified, I knew. But she was there. She was witnessing the attempted murder of her father-in-law. That footage would be the nail in Darius's coffin. Brenda finished her work. She stood up, wiped her oily hands on her apron, and looked down the stairs. She smiled. It was a small, tight smile of satisfaction. She whispered something to herself, then turned and walked back toward her bedroom. She left the bottle of oil on the side table right where a clumsy old man might have knocked it over. She was setting the scene. It had to look like an accident. I waited until her door clicked shut. Then I moved. I retreated into my bedroom. On the bed lay my stunt double. I had spent the afternoon constructing him. A heavy punching bag from my old gym days wrapped in pillows to give it bulk, dressed in my favorite silk pajamas and a housecoat. I had weighted the head with a bag of sand. It was crude, but in the dark at the bottom of a staircase, it would pass for a broken body. I dragged the dummy to the door. It was heavy, dead weight. It felt like dragging a corpse. I positioned it at the top of the stairs, just above the oil slick. I took a deep breath. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were steady. This was theater. This was the grand finale of Act 2. I needed sound. A fall is violent. It is loud. I had prepared for that too. In my hand, I held a heavy leather-bound encyclopedia and a cantaloupe melon. I looked at the time. 11:45 p.m. Darius would be waiting by his phone. I shoved the dummy. It tipped over the edge. It hit the oiled steps and accelerated, sliding, tumbling. It struck the banister with a dull thud, spinning in the air. Then it hit the marble floor below. Crash! At the exact moment of impact, I slammed the encyclopedia against the wall and smashed the cantaloupe onto the floor of the landing. The sound was sickening. It sounded exactly like bone cracking against stone. It echoed through the silent house, a gunshot of violence. I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, my heart racing. Silence. Then a door opened. Brenda came running out of her room. She was acting. She was screaming before she even saw the body. Mr. King. Mr. King, are you okay? Oh my God. She ran to the top of the stairs. She stopped. She looked down. In the dim light of the foyer, the shape at the bottom of the stairs looked undeniable. Twisted limbs, a head at an unnatural angle, stillness. She didn't rush down to help. She didn't check for a pulse. She gripped the banister and leaned over, staring. The screaming stopped instantly. The panic vanished from her face. Is he dead? She whispered to the empty air. She took a step down, careful to avoid the oil she had placed. She walked down slowly, step by step, her eyes fixed on the body. When she reached the bottom, she nudged the dummy's leg with her foot. It didn't move. She let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. She didn't check his neck. She didn't try CPR. She pulled out her phone. It is done, she said into the receiver. He fell. It sounded bad. Come now. No, don't call 911 yet. Just get here. We need to make sure he is gone before the paramedics come. She hung up. She walked into the living room and sat on the sofa waiting. She didn't look at the body again. She just sat there, smoothing her hair, preparing her face for the grieving nurse routine. I watched from the top of the stairs. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. That woman had just watched what she thought was a man dying, and her first instinct was to wait it out. 10 minutes later, headlights swept across the front windows. Tires crunched on gravel. The front door opened. Darius walked in. He was wearing a black coat, the collar turned up. He looked like a man arriving at a funeral he was late for. He stopped in the doorway. He saw the body at the foot of the stairs, the twisted pile of silk and sand that he thought was his father. He didn't run, he didn't cry out, he didn't drop to his knees. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the cold wind. He locked it. He walked over to the body. He stood over it, looking down. He looked at the face, which was turned away, hidden in the crook of the arm. He looked at the stillness. Brenda stood up from the sofa. Is he dead, Darius? Darius didn't answer her. He nudged the body with the toe of his expensive Italian boot. A hard kick. A disrespectful kick. He slipped, he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. He slipped on the stairs. Old men fall. It happens all the time. He looked up at the top of the stairs. He looked right at the spot where I was hiding in the dark. He couldn't see me, but I could see him. I could see the look in his eyes. It wasn't sorrow, it was calculation. He walked past the body. He literally stepped over it. He walked into the living room, past Brenda, straight to the liquor cabinet. He opened the crystal decanter of scotch. My scotch. The bottle I was saving for his wedding day, the one I never opened because I knew he wasn't ready. He poured himself a glass. He didn't offer one to Brenda. He took a long, slow drink, savoring the burn. He turned back to the room, glass in hand, gesturing to the heap on the floor with his drink. Well, he said, a smile creeping onto his face. A smile that was terrifying in its genuine happiness. That solves the liquidity problem. Brenda looked at him, a little uneasy. Shouldn't we call 911 now? It has been 20 minutes. If they do an autopsy... Let him sit, Darius said, taking another sip. Let him get cold. I want to be sure. I don't want any miracles tonight. I don't want any comas. I want a corpse. He walked over to the fireplace and leaned against the mantel, looking at the body like it was a trophy deer he had just bagged. $5 million, he whispered. Plus the house, plus the trust. He raised his glass in a mock toast to the dummy. Thanks for the donation, Dad. You finally did something useful. I stood in the dark, gripping the banisters so hard the wood creaked. I had seen enough. I had heard enough. Any shred of doubt, any tiny flicker of hope that my son might have a soul was gone. He was drinking my liquor over my warm corpse. He was celebrating my death before I was even in the ground. I pulled the burner phone from my pocket. I texted Ray. It is done. He is here. He didn't call. He is drinking. Then I texted Emily. Stay hidden. Don't come out until you hear my voice. I put the phone away. I adjusted my jacket. I took a deep breath. It was time for the resurrection. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked to the top of the stairs. I looked down at the man who was toasting my death. Darius, I boomed, my voice echoing off the high ceilings like the voice of God. That is good scotch. I hope you are enjoying it. It cost more than your soul. Darius dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor, spraying amber liquid and crystal shards everywhere. He spun around, his eyes bulging, his mouth falling open in a silent scream. Brenda screamed for him, a high, piercing shriek of terror. They looked up at me, standing at the top of the stairs, alive, furious, and ready to bring the roof down on their heads. Darius stood by the fireplace, the crystal glass of my best scotch raised in a toast to my demise. He was smiling. It was the smile of a man who had just won the lottery after betting his last dollar. Brenda was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, probably looking up expensive vacations or funeral attire. They weren't looking at the body at the foot of the stairs. They were looking at their future. I stood in the shadows of the second-floor landing, my heart hammering a war drum against my ribs. I had intended to walk down there. I had intended to roar like a lion and strike the fear of God into them. But as I watched my son swirl the amber liquid in his glass, a new thought crystallized in my mind, a colder, sharper thought. If I revealed myself now, it would be my word against theirs. They would claim I was senile, paranoid, that I had staged the whole thing. The police would come, but without a body, without a smoking gun, it would be a messy legal battle. Darius would fight dirty. He would destroy the business, the reputation, everything I built just to spite me. No, I didn't want to just scare him. I wanted to own him. I wanted him to think he had won right up until the moment the cell door slammed shut. I needed to be the body. I looked at the dummy lying in a heap on the marble floor. Darius had his back turned. Brenda was distracted. The foyer was dim. I moved. I am 74, but adrenaline is a powerful drug. I moved silently down the carpeted hallway to the back servants' stairs that led to the kitchen. I circled around through the dining room, moving like a shadow in the house I designed. I reached the coat closet under the main staircase. I opened it softly. Darius was laughing at something Brenda said. The sound covered my movements. I crawled out. I grabbed the dummy by its collar and dragged it into the closet. It was heavy, dead weight, but I hauled it in and shut the door. Then I took its place. I lay down on the cold, oil-slicked marble. I twisted my body into the same unnatural angle. I sprawled my legs. I tucked my arm under my head. I closed my eyes. I lay there listening to my own shallow breathing, smelling the olive oil and the faint metallic scent of the floor wax. I waited. It took them 5 minutes. 5 minutes of celebrating my death while I lay 10 feet away, alive and burning with rage. Finally, Darius spoke. "I should check him," he said. "Make sure he is cooling off." I heard his footsteps. Click, click, click. The expensive Italian leather hitting the stone. He stopped right beside my head. I could smell the scotch on his breath. I could smell his sweat. He nudged my ribs with his toe. Harder this time. It hurt, but I didn't flinch. "He is gone," Darius said. "He is just a sack of meat now." He leaned down. I felt his hand near my neck. He was checking for a pulse. This was it, the moment the trap would spring. I let out a cough. It was a wet, rattling, guttural sound that tore through the silence of the foyer like a chainsaw. Darius screamed. He jumped back, tripping over his own feet and crashing into the console table. The vase on top wobbled and fell shattering into 1,000 pieces. Brenda shrieked from the living room. "What happened? What is it?" He moved. Darius yelled, his voice high and trembling. He moved. He coughed. I opened my eyes. I didn't focus them. I let them roll back slightly, fluttering my eyelids. I let out a low, pained groan that rumbled in my chest. Darius was staring at me, his face a mask of pure horror. He looked like he was seeing a ghost claw its way out of the grave. He wasn't looking at a father. He was looking at a problem that refused to be solved. I stammered, slurring my words. Brenda ran into the foyer. "Is he alive?" "He is alive," Darius hissed. "The old bastard is alive. How is he alive?" He fell 20 feet. I tried to sit up, then collapsed back onto the floor with a cry of pain. I didn't have to fake the pain much. My hip was throbbing from the hard floor. Where am I?" I whispered. Darius froze. He looked at Brenda, then he looked back at me. He took a step closer, cautious, like approaching a wounded bear. "Dad," he said, "do you know who I am?" I squinted at him. I frowned. I looked around the foyer as if I had never seen it before. Who are you?" I asked. "Where is Viola?" "I want Viola. Viola has been dead for 10 years. Darius's eyes widened. A spark of realization lit up his face. It wasn't fear anymore, it was calculation. "He doesn't remember," he whispered to Brenda. He hit his head. "He doesn't remember the fall. He doesn't remember anything." Brenda looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "Are you sure?" "Maybe he is faking." "Look at him," Darius said. "He is calling for Mom. His brain is scrambled." He knelt down beside me. He put a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and cold. "Dad, you fell," he said slowly, loudly, as if speaking to a child. "You had an accident." "Accident," I repeated, testing the word. I fell." "Yes, you slipped, but you are going to be okay." He looked at Brenda. He made a slashing motion across his throat, then pointed to the phone. He was mouthing words. "Not now. Too risky. He couldn't kill me now. Not with me awake making noise. Not with the neighbors potentially hearing the scream. And if I didn't remember anything, if I was just a vegetable, then I wasn't a threat. I was an opportunity." "Call 911, Darius said. "But wait. Get rid of the oil first. Wipe the stairs." Brenda ran to the kitchen. I heard the sound of rags being scrubbed frantically against marble. Darius stayed with me, holding me down, not to comfort me, but to make sure I didn't get up and see something I shouldn't. "Just stay still, old man," he whispered. "Just stay still, and let us take care of you." 10 minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. The cavalry was coming. But Darius wasn't afraid. He had cleaned the scene. He had a story, and he had a father with a broken brain. The paramedics rushed in. They loaded me onto a stretcher. I kept up the act, mumbling about Viola, asking about my construction site from 1985. Darius played the grieving son perfectly, holding my hand, wiping fake tears from his eyes. At the hospital, they wheeled me into the ER. I waited. I knew who was on duty. I had made the call before I went down the stairs. Dr. Vance walked into the trauma room. He was wearing his white coat, looking every inch the respectable medical professional. He wasn't a trauma doctor, but he had privileges here, and he had intercepted my admission. He shined a light in my eyes. He checked my reflexes. He looked at the CT scans that the technician had just run. Darius and Brenda were hovering in the doorway, anxious vultures. Dr. Darius asked, "How is he? Will he recover?" Vance turned to them. He adjusted his glasses. He looked grave. "Mr. King has suffered a severe traumatic brain injury," Vance said. "The swelling is significant. He is confused, disoriented, and his short-term memory is gone. It is likely permanent. He has regressed." Darius tried to look sad, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward. "Permanent?" he asked. "So, he can't make decisions. He can't manage his affairs." Vance shook his head. "I am afraid not. He will need round-the-clock care. He will need a legal guardian to handle his estate and his medical decisions. He is, for all intents and purposes, a child." I lay on the gurney, staring at the ceiling tiles, drooling slightly for effect. I watched Darius through my peripheral vision. The fear was gone. The panic was gone. In their place was a look of pure, unadulterated greed. He didn't need to kill me. He didn't need to risk a murder charge. He just needed a judge to sign a piece of paper. He looked at Brenda. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just been handed the keys to the vault. "I will do it," Darius said solemnly. "I will be his guardian. It is my burden to bear." Vance nodded. "I will prepare the paperwork for your lawyer." Darius turned to leave the room, his step light, his posture erect. He was already spending the money in his head. He was already planning the parties. I closed my eyes. Let him smile. Let him think he won. He didn't know that Vance was recording the diagnosis on a private server. He didn't know that the brain damage was a fabrication between two old friends. And he didn't know that by applying for guardianship of a man who was perfectly sane, he was committing fraud on a massive scale. He was walking out of the hospital a free man, but he was walking straight into the jaws of a trap that would never let him go. "Sleep tight, son," I thought, "because when I wake up, your nightmare begins. The wheels of justice grind slow, but the wheels of greed spin like a turbine." Less than 48 hours after my staged fall down the stairs, I found myself being wheeled into the Cook County Courthouse. I was sitting in a wheelchair that squeaked with every rotation, wearing a hospital gown under a loose cardigan with a blanket tucked over my knees. I looked like a man who had been broken in half. I looked like a man who didn't know what year it was. Darius walked behind me, pushing the chair. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost $3,000 a suit I had paid for 3 Christmases ago. He walked with a somber, measured pace, his head bowed, the very picture of the grieving, burdened son. But I could feel the vibration of his excitement traveling down the handles of the wheelchair. He was practically humming. We were there for an emergency hearing. Darius had filed an ex parte petition for temporary guardianship. He claimed that due to my sudden and catastrophic brain injury, I was an immediate danger to myself and my estate. He claimed that without his steady hand on the wheel, the King Empire would collapse, leaving hundreds of employees destitute. It was a lie woven with threads of truth, the most dangerous kind. We entered the courtroom. It was empty save for the judge, the bailiff, and the court reporter. This wasn't a trial. It was a formality, or so Darius thought. The judge was Honorable Marcus Thorne. I knew him. I had donated to his re-election campaign 5 years ago. He was a good man, stern but fair. He looked down at me from the bench, his eyes filled with concern. He didn't see the tycoon who had reshaped the skyline. He saw a drooling invalid. "Mr. King, Judge Thorne said gently, "Can you hear me? Do you know where you are?" I let my head loll to the side. I focused my eyes on a spot on the wall, refusing to make contact. I opened my mouth and let out a low, confused moan. "Viola," I rasped. "Viola, the roast is burning." Darius stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. It felt like a branding iron. "Your Honor," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "He has been like this since the accident. He thinks my mother is still alive. He thinks he is back in 1980. Dr. Vance says the trauma caused significant regression." Darius's lawyer, a shark named Silverstein, who charged $500 an hour, stepped up to the bench. He handed over the file. "We have the medical affidavit from Dr. Vance, Your Honor. It confirms severe cognitive impairment. Mr. King requires 24-hour supervision. He cannot manage his finances. He cannot make medical decisions. He is legally speaking incapacitated." The judge flipped through the pages. I watched him through my peripheral vision. I saw him read Vance's fabricated report. Vance had done a masterful job. He used words like diffuse axonal injury and frontal lobe contusion. He painted a picture of a brain that had been turned to scramble eggs. Judge Thorne looked at me again. Sadness etched lines into his face. "This is a tragedy," he murmured. "Lucius King was a giant in this city." "Is Your Honor," Darius corrected softly. "And I intend to protect his legacy. But I need the authority to pay his bills, to manage the properties, to ensure he gets the best care. The banks have frozen the accounts because of the suspicious activity. Well, because of his confusion before the fall. He was slick. He was using the trap I had set the frozen accounts as evidence of my incompetence." The judge nodded. "I understand the urgency. I decided it was time to sell the performance. I started to agitate. I gripped the armrests of the wheelchair. I started to shake. 'No,' I shouted, my voice cracking. 'The concrete is wet. Don't pour yet. The inspector isn't here.' I tried to stand up, then collapsed back into the chair, panting. 'Dad, it is okay,' Darius soothed, stroking my arm. 'We are not at the construction site. You are safe.' He looked up at the judge, a single perfect tear sliding down his cheek. 'You see, Your Honor, he is lost.' I slumped back, closing my eyes. Inside, I was screaming. I wanted to stand up and strangle him. I wanted to tell the judge that this man was a murderer, a thief, a parasite, but I couldn't. If I proved I was sane now, the guardianship would be denied. Darius would be free. He would run. He would disappear. I needed him to win. I needed him to think he had total control. Because only when he felt safe would he lead me to the money he had stolen. Only when he had the keys would he open the doors to his own destruction. "I grant the petition," Judge Thorne said, banging his gavel. It sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Darius King is appointed temporary guardian of the person and estate of Lucius King for a period of 30 days. A permanent hearing will be scheduled for next month." 30 days. Darius had 30 days to drain me dry, and I had 30 days to bury him. "Thank you, Your Honor," Darius said. "I won't let him down." He wheeled me out of the courtroom. As soon as the heavy doors swung shut behind us, the transformation was instant. The grieving son vanished. He stopped the wheelchair in the middle of the hallway. He leaned over me, his face inches from mine. "Did you hear that, old man?" he whispered. 30 days. I own you. I own your house. I own your money. I own your life." He laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "You should have just eaten the chocolate," he said. "It would have been quicker. Now you are going to watch me spend every dime you ever made." He pushed me toward the elevator, whistling a jaunty tune. We went down to the parking garage. He didn't help me into the car gently. He shoved me into the passenger seat of his Porsche like a bag of laundry. He threw the folded wheelchair into the back. We drove home in silence. Darius drove fast, reckless. He was high on power. He texted with one hand while doing 80 on the expressway. He was probably texting the butcher, telling him the money was coming. When we pulled into the driveway of my estate, I saw Emily's car. She was waiting. Darius parked and hauled me out. He didn't take me inside immediately. He left me sitting in the wheelchair on the driveway while he walked up the steps. Emily opened the door. She looked pale, terrified. She looked at me, then at Darius. Is it done?" she asked. Darius didn't answer. He walked past her into the house. He stood in the center of the foyer, right where my body had lain the night before. He spread his arms wide. "It is mine," he shouted. "It is all mine." Emily flinched. "Darius, please. Your father—" "Shut up," he snapped. He turned on her, his face twisting into a snarl. "I am done listening to your whining. I am done with your fear. I am the guardian. I am the king now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. "My keys. Pack your bags, Emily." She froze. "What? You heard me. Pack your bags, get the kids, and get out." Emily stared at him, her mouth opening and closing. "Get out. But this is our home. Where will we go?" "I don't care where you go," Darius said. "Go to your mother's. Go to a shelter. Just get out of my sight. You are a downer, Emily. You are weak. You are always crying about bills, about debts. I don't need that energy anymore." I am rich. He walked over to her and grabbed her arm, spinning her toward the door. You have an hour, he hissed. If you are not gone by the time I finish a drink, I will throw you out myself. Emily looked at me. She looked at the helpless old man in the wheelchair. I couldn't speak. I couldn't break character. But I locked eyes with her. I gave her the tiniest nod. Go. Save the children. Stick to the plan. She understood. She didn't fight him. She didn't beg. She turned and ran up the stairs to the children's rooms. Darius watched her go, then turned his attention back to the driveway. You can come in now, he yelled. A car I hadn't noticed pulled up the long drive. It was a red convertible. Flashy, trashy. The door opened and Brenda stepped out. She was wearing a fur coat and sunglasses, carrying 2 suitcases. She looked at the house like a queen surveying her new kingdom. Darius walked down the steps to meet her. He grabbed her by the waist and kissed her a long, sloppy kiss right there in front of his father, right there while his wife was upstairs packing their children's lives into boxes. Welcome home, baby, Darius said. Brenda giggled. She looked at me sitting in the wheelchair. Hey there, Pops, she said, blowing a bubble with her gum. Looks like we are going to be roommates. Darius laughed. He grabbed the handles of my chair. Let's get you to your room, Dad, he said. We have a lot of celebrating to do. And you have a front row seat. He wheeled me inside, past the spot where I had faked my death, past the kitchen where he had tried to gas me. He wheeled me into a small room off the kitchen, the old maid's quarters. It was dusty. It smelled of disuse. This is your new suite, Darius said. Cozy. He left me there. He didn't close the door. He wanted me to hear. I sat in the semi-darkness, listening to the sounds of my life being dismantled. I heard Emily dragging suitcases down the stairs. I heard my grandchildren crying, asking why they had to leave Grandpa. I heard the front door slam shut as my daughter-in-law and grandchildren were exiled from their home. And then I heard the music start. Loud thumping bass. I heard champagne corks popping. I heard Brenda's shrill laughter and Darius's booming voice. To us, Darius shouted, "To the winners." I sat in the wheelchair, my hands resting on my lap. They were steady. My mind was clear. He had 30 days. But he wouldn't last that long. He had just made the classic mistake of the villain. He got arrogant. He got cruel. He showed his hand to everyone. He thought he had won the war. But he had just invited the Trojan horse into his city. He had locked me in, yes. But he had also locked himself in with me. I listened to them party. I waited. Tonight they would drink. Tomorrow they would spend. And while they were distracted by their victory lap, I would be tightening the noose. The king was dead. Long live the king. For the first 3 days of my imprisonment, the house sounded like a bazaar. I sat in the maid's room, a cramped 10-by-10 box with a single window that looked out onto the brick wall of the garage. The air smelled of stale lemon polish and dust. My bed was a cot. My bathroom was a sink in the corner. But I didn't mind the conditions. I grew up sleeping 4 to a bed in a tenement. I could survive a cot. What I minded was the noise. It was the sound of my life being liquidated. Darius didn't waste a second. He knew the guardianship gave him control, but he also knew that liquidating the big assets, the buildings, the land, took time and court approval. He didn't have time. He had the butcher breathing down his neck. So he started with the things he could carry. I heard the heavy boots of movers echoing in the hallway. I heard the crash of furniture being dragged. I heard the distinct, heartbreaking rumble of my vintage 1967 Shelby Mustang being loaded onto a flatbed truck outside. He came to visit me on the second day. He was wearing my Rolex, the gold Daytona I bought when I made my first million. It hung loose on his wrist. He didn't have the bone structure to carry it. "How are we doing today, Dad?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. He was eating an apple, chewing loudly. I stared at the wall, rocking slightly in my wheelchair. I let a line of drool escape the corner of my mouth. I murmured something about the price of steel in 1990. He laughed. "You are missing all the fun. We are doing some spring cleaning, getting rid of the junk. You won't need it where you are going." Where is Viola?" I rasped. "She is shopping," Darius said, taking a bite of the apple. "She is buying a coffin." He left, locking the door behind him. I heard him on the phone in the kitchen. "Yeah, take the paintings too. I don't care if they are originals. Just get me the cash. Wire it to the operating account. Today. I need it. Today." He was selling my art collection for pennies on the dollar. He was bleeding the house dry to pay the vig. He thought the money was flowing into the main account, ready for him to withdraw and hand over to the mob. He was wrong. I waited until his footsteps faded down the hall. Then I reached under the mattress of the cot. I pulled out a small knife I had swiped from my dinner tray, a dull butter knife, but enough to pry up the loose floorboard in the corner of the room. Beneath the floorboard, wrapped in oilcloth, was my lifeline, a satellite phone. I had hidden it there 5 years ago, not because I expected my son to try to kill me, but because I am a man who knows that in Chicago the power grid can fail, but business never stops. It was fully charged. I dialed Henderson, my private banker. Mr. King, Henderson whispered. I thought. Yo, the news said you were incapacitated. Listen to me, Henderson. I don't have much time. Darius has guardianship. He is selling the chattels. He is dumping the cash into the primary trust account. I see the deposits, sir. $300,000 just came in from an auction house. Good. Now listen carefully. I want you to trigger the level 5 security protocol on that account. Henderson gasped. Sir, that freezes everything. It flags the account for federal review. It locks it down for a minimum of 72 hours. Not even a court order can open it immediately. Do it, I commanded. And Henderson, when he tries to write a check or make a wire transfer, I want you to decline it. Tell him it is a system error. Tell him it is a routing issue. Tell him anything. Just do not let a single cent leave that bank. Done, Mr. King. Stay safe. I hung up and hid the phone. I lay back on the cot and closed my eyes. I imagined the look on Darius's face when he tried to access the money. He was selling my soul to save his skin, but he was just filling a bucket with a hole in the bottom. That night, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The selling stopped. The partying began. Darius had decided that since he was technically rich, at least on paper, he needed to celebrate. He invited his crew, the hangers-on, the sycophants, the people who had helped him gamble away his future. I heard the music start at 8 p.m. The bass thumped through the floorboards, vibrating in my teeth. I heard the laughter of women who weren't his wife. I heard the pop of champagne corks. Brenda came in to check on me around 9. She was wearing a sequined dress that was too tight and holding a glass of pink champagne. She looked like she had won a beauty pageant in hell. Here is your dinner, old man, she said, dropping a cold sandwich on my lap. Try not to choke. We are having a party. You are not invited. She spun around and left, leaving the door slightly ajar. She wanted me to hear. She wanted me to know that they were living in my castle while I rotted in the dungeon. I ate the sandwich. I needed the strength. By midnight, the party was raging. I could hear Darius shouting, holding court in the living room. He was drunk. He was high on power. To the king he roared. The new king. The guests cheered. I heard glass breaking. I heard someone vomiting in the hallway. They were desecrating my home. They were treating it like a frat house. But then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a normal ring. It was a long, insistent press that didn't stop. The music didn't die down immediately. The doorbell rang again, followed by a heavy pounding on the front oak door. It sounded like a battering ram. I wheeled myself to the crack in the door. I could see a sliver of the kitchen and the hallway beyond. Darius stumbled into view. He was holding a bottle of vodka, his shirt unbuttoned. "Who is it?" he yelled. "Who is ruining the vibe?" He walked to the front door. I heard him unlock it. "What do you want?" he slurred. The door flew open. The sound of the party died instantly. It was as if someone had sucked the air out of the room. 2 men walked in. They were huge. They wore cheap leather jackets and expressions of stone. They didn't look like party guests. They looked like gravestones. Behind them walked a smaller man. He was dressed in a beige trench coat. He had a thin face and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like an accountant, but his eyes were dead. Darius took a step back. The bottle of vodka slipped from his fingers and smashed on the floor, but no one looked at it. Mr. Varga, Darius stammered. What are you doing here? I told you I would pay. Mr. Varga. The man in the trench coat stepped over the broken glass. He looked around the foyer. He looked at the guests who were now backing away, sensing the violence radiating off these men. "You threw a party," Darius Varga said. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried through the silent house. "You threw a party with my money." No, Darius said, his hands shaking. "I sold the cars. I sold the art. The money is in the account. I wrote you the check. I sent the courier this afternoon." Varga reached into his pocket. He pulled out a piece of paper. It was a check for $50,000. He held it up. It bounced Darius. Darius went white. Impossible. "I deposited 300 grand today. It is there. It has to be there." Varga crumpled the check and let it fall to the floor. Insufficient funds. Account frozen. That is what the teller said. Do you think I am a fool, Darius? Do you think you can buy time with bad paper? I gripped the armrests of my wheelchair. Henderson had done it. The freeze worked. Darius had money in the bank, but he couldn't touch it. He was standing in a room full of champagne, penniless. Darius fell to his knees. Mr. Varga, please. It is a mistake. A bank error. My father is sick. The accounts are complicated. I can fix it. Give me until morning. I will go to the branch personally. I will scream at them. Varga signaled to the two large men. They stepped forward. One of them grabbed Darius by the hair and hauled him to his feet. The other punched him in the stomach. Darius doubled over, wheezing, retching on the floor. The guests screamed. Some started to run for the back door. Varga didn't stop them. He didn't care about the witnesses. He wanted an audience. Brenda stood at the top of the stairs, frozen in terror. She didn't come down to help him. Varga crouched down next to my son. He grabbed Darius's chin and forced him to look up. You have 48 hours, Varga said. Not a minute more. If I don't have $2 million in cash, not checks, not wire transfers, cash by Friday night, I am not coming back for money. I am coming for you. And I am coming for the nurse upstairs. He stood up. He smoothed his coat. 48 hours, Darius. Tick-tock. He turned and walked out. The two giants followed him. The front door was left open, letting the winter wind howl through the house. Darius lay on the floor, curled into a ball, sobbing. He was surrounded by the wreckage of his party, the smell of spilled vodka, and the absolute certainty of his own doom. I sat in the dark maid's room watching. He had 48 hours to find $2 million in cash. The bank was locked. His credit was dead. He had no friends left. He had only one option. The insurance policy. The $5 million that only paid out if I died. He pushed himself up. He wiped the vomit from his mouth. He looked toward the kitchen. He looked toward my door. His eyes were wild. They were the eyes of a cornered rat. Get out! He screamed at the remaining guests. Get out! Everyone get out! He scrambled to his feet, slipping on the vodka. He ran toward the kitchen. He kicked my door open. I looked up at him, keeping my face blank, my eyes confused. Who are you? I mumbled. Why is it so loud? Darius stared at me. He was breathing like a bellows. You have to die, he whispered. You have to die for real this time. He slammed the door shut and locked it from the outside. I heard him running up the stairs. I heard him shouting for Brenda. We have to do it, he yelled. The needle. Get the needle. I wheeled myself back to the cot. I reached under the mattress and touched the cold metal of the phone. The game was entering the final round. He was coming for me. But he didn't know that I had already dug his grave. I just needed him to fall into it. I lay on the cot in the maid's room, listening to the silence that had settled over the house like a shroud. The party guests were gone. The music had stopped. The only sound was the wind rattling the single-pane window and the frantic pacing of my son in the kitchen just outside my door. It was 3 a.m., the witching hour, the time when good men sleep and desperate men make deals with the devil. I knew he was coming. The visit from Varga and his goons had stripped away Darius's last layer of denial. He had 48 hours to find $2 million, or he would be carved up like a Thanksgiving turkey. The bank account was frozen. The assets were seized or unsellable in that time frame. He had only one card left to play. Me. Or rather, my death. The insurance policy Emily had told me about. $5 million, payable upon proof of death. If I died tonight, he could file the claim tomorrow. He could take the certificate to Varga. It would buy him time. It would save his life. But it would cost me mine. My hands slipped under the thin mattress again, checking for the small vial Dr. Vance had given me weeks ago. It was there. A beta-blocker cocktail designed to slow the heart rate to a crawl, mimicking death for a short window. It was my escape hatch. But I couldn't use it yet. I had to wait until the threat was absolute. I needed them to commit. I heard the kitchen door open. Whispers. Harsh, urgent whispers. You have to do it, Darius hissed. You are the nurse. You know how. I can't. Brenda whimpered. Her voice was shaky, stripped of its usual arrogance. Poisoning an old man over weeks is one thing, Darius. Injecting him with an overdose while he sleeps is murder. It is execution. Do you want Varga to cut off your fingers? Darius snapped. Because he will. He said he is coming for both of us. We are in this together, Brenda. There is no way out. There was a scuffle, the sound of shoes dragging on linoleum. Just give him the shot, Darius said. It is insulin. High dose. He will go into shock. His heart will stop. It will look like a metabolic crash from the trauma. Vance already said his brain is mush. No one will question it. Insulin. Smart. Hard to detect in a diabetic if you aren't looking for it. I reached into my pocket and tapped the screen of the burner phone 3 times. It was the signal. Earlier that evening, while the party was raging upstairs, I had sent a text to Emily. She had been hiding at a motel on the edge of town, terrified, waiting for my command. I told her to come back. I gave her the code to the service entrance in the basement, a door Darius had forgotten about because he never did his own laundry. I told her to hide in the linen closet connected to the maid's room. It had a slat door. Perfect for recording. I heard a faint creak from the closet behind me, a tiny, almost imperceptible sound. Emily was there. She was watching. She was the witness I needed to put my son away for life. The lock on my door clicked. The knob turned. Darius and Brenda entered the room. The only light came from the hallway, cutting a yellow swath across the dusty floor. Darius looked like a specter. His skin was pale, his eyes wide, and manic sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. He was holding a flashlight. Brenda was behind him, holding a medical kit. She was trembling so hard the instruments inside rattled. "Close the door," Darius ordered. Brenda pushed the door shut, plunging us into semi-darkness. Darius clicked the flashlight on, aiming it at my face. I squeezed my eyes shut, feigning a deep, medicated sleep. I let my mouth hang open, letting out a soft, snoring wheeze. "Wake him up," Brenda whispered. "I can't do it if he is sleeping. It feels wrong." "Don't wake him up, you idiot," Darius growled. "If he wakes up, he might struggle. Just do it. Find a vein." I felt the mattress dip as Brenda sat on the edge of the cot. I smelled her perfume, now mixed with the sour scent of fear and stale champagne. Her hands were cold as she touched my arm. She was searching for the vein in the crook of my elbow. I kept my breathing steady, fighting the instinct to recoil. This was the hardest part, to lie still while the executioner prepped the lethal injection. "Hurry up," Darius urged, pacing the small room. "Varga has guys watching the house. I saw a car parked down the street. We need this done now." "I can't find it," Brenda sobbed softly. "His veins are collapsed. He is dehydrated." "Find it," Darius hissed. I felt the prick of an alcohol wipe against my skin. Cold. Wet. The ritual before the sacrifice. Behind the slats of the closet door I saw the glint of a camera lens. Emily was filming. She was capturing every second of this. The flashlight beam, the syringe in Brenda's hand, the look of pure, desperate malice on my son's face. This video was worth more than the $5 million he was trying to kill me for. Brenda uncapped the syringe. I cracked my eyes open, just a slit. The needle was long. It glinted in the flashlight beam. It was filled with clear liquid. Enough insulin to drop a bull elephant. "Do it," Darius said. His voice was guttural. "Do it now." Brenda took a deep breath. She steadied her hand. She positioned the needle over my arm. I tensed my muscles. I was ready to move. I was ready to grab her wrist, break it if I had to, and unleash the fury I had been holding back for weeks. I wasn't going to let that needle break my skin. I just needed it close enough to prove intent. Closer. Closer. The tip of the needle touched the fine hairs on my arm. I could feel the cold steel against my skin, and then the world exploded in noise. Whoop, whoop, whoop! A siren wail tore through the silence of the night so loud it vibrated the teeth in my skull. It wasn't a police siren, it was the house security alarm. The perimeter breach alarm. Brenda screamed and jerked back, dropping the syringe. It hit the floor and rolled under the cot. Darius spun around, dropping the flashlight. The beam spun wildly around the room. "What the hell is that?" he shouted over the noise. "It is the alarm," Brenda shrieked, covering her ears. "The police are coming! You said you disabled it!" "I did disable it," Darius yelled. "I cut the wires." He had cut the wires to the main panel, but he didn't know about the silent backup system I had installed in the panic room downstairs. He didn't know that I had triggered it remotely with the button on the side of my burner phone. I sat up on the cot. I dropped the act. I looked at my son, whose face was now illuminated by the strobe lights flashing from the hallway. He looked at me. He saw me sitting up, alert, eyes clear and cold as ice. He saw the realization dawn on him. "You," he whispered. The siren wailed on a deafening scream that signaled the end of the game. "Run!" Brenda yelled, scrambling for the door. "Run, Darius!" But Darius didn't run. He stared at me. He stared at the empty spot on my arm where the needle should have been, and for the first time, he understood. He hadn't trapped me. I had trapped him. But a trapped animal is the most dangerous kind. And as the siren blared, drowning out the world, Darius reached into his jacket. He wasn't reaching for a checkbook. He wasn't reaching for a phone. He pulled out a gun. If the needle wouldn't do it, he mouthed, raising the weapon, "Then this will." The siren screamed on a relentless pulse of noise that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Darius stood over me, the gun in his hand trembling. His eyes were wide, manic, the eyes of a man who had crossed every line and found himself standing on the edge of an abyss. He wanted to shoot. I could see the muscle in his jaw twitching, his finger tightening on the trigger. But he knew, even in his madness, that a bullet wound was a messy business. A bullet wound meant police investigations, ballistics questions he couldn't answer. He needed a heart attack. He needed a quiet death. I didn't give him time to think. I didn't give him time to realize that the alarm wasn't just a noise, but a clock counting down the seconds of his freedom. My hand was already under the pillow, my fingers closing around the cold glass of the vial Dr. Vance had given me. It was a beta-blocker cocktail potent enough to stop a rhino's heart, or in a human, slow it down to a beat so faint it was indistinguishable from death. It was a gamble. It was the biggest gamble of my life. But looking at the barrel of that gun, I liked my odds better with the needle. I gasped a loud, ragged sound that drew Darius's eyes to my face. I clutched my chest with my left hand while my right hand brought the syringe up from beneath the sheets. My heart. I wheezed. "Darius!" He hesitated, the gun lowered an inch. He watched fascinated as I arched my back, my body convulsing in a performance of cardiac arrest that felt all too real. I slammed the needle into my thigh. I didn't feel the prick. I just felt the cold rush of the liquid entering my bloodstream. It hit me like a freight train. The world turned gray at the edges. My limbs felt heavy as if they were turning to lead. The sound of the siren began to stretch and warp, slowing down into a deep rhythmic thrumming. I collapsed back onto the cot. My eyes rolled back. I let out one final long exhale, emptying my lungs of air, and then I stopped moving. I couldn't see, but I could hear. The drug paralyzed my voluntary muscles, locking me inside my own body. I was a prisoner in a corpse of my own making. My heart rate dropped. Thump. Pause. Thump. Pause. It was terrifying. It was the closest I had ever come to the void. Darius dropped the gun. I heard it clatter against the floorboards. "Dad," he whispered. He stepped closer. I felt the vibration of his footsteps. He was standing right over me. "Brenda, check him," he barked. I felt Brenda's hands on my neck. Her fingers were cold and clammy. She pressed hard against my carotid artery. She waited. Thump. She waited. Thump. It was slow. So slow that unless you were a trained cardiologist looking for a faint rhythm, you would miss it. Brenda wasn't a cardiologist. She was a thief in a nurse's uniform. He is not breathing," she stammered. "I don't feel a pulse. Darius, I think he is gone." "Are you sure?" Darius demanded. His voice was rising in pitch, a mix of panic and elation. "I am sure." His heart stopped. The shock, the fall. It was too much. Darius let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "He is dead. He is actually dead." He didn't cry for his father. He cried for his salvation. He cried because the $2 million debt hanging over his head had just vanished. "Call the doctor," he ordered. "Not 911. Call Vance. He is the family doctor. He will sign the certificate. Tell him he passed in his sleep. Tell him the trauma was too much." I lay there in the dark, listening. This was the pivot point. If Vance didn't play his part, if he called an ambulance instead of a hearse, the game was over. I had to trust my old friend. I had to trust that he understood the plan. I heard Brenda make the call. She was crying, putting on the performance of her life. "Oh, Dr. Vance, it is terrible. Mr. King, he just stopped breathing. We tried everything." 20 minutes later, I heard the front door open. Heavy footsteps came down the hall. Vance. He entered the room. He smelled of antiseptic and peppermint. He didn't speak to them. He walked straight to the cot. I felt his hands on me. Professional. Steady. He peeled back my eyelid and shined a light. I didn't react. I couldn't. The drug had me locked down tight. He put his stethoscope to my chest. He listened for a long time. He was listening to the slow, stubborn beat of my heart, counting the seconds between life and death. Finally, he straightened up. Time of death, 3:42 a.m., Vance said. Vance. His voice was grave heavy with the weight of the lie. Massive cardiac arrest. Given his history and the recent trauma, it isn't unexpected. Darius let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. Is it over?" he asked. "It is over," Vance said. "I will prepare the death certificate. I will call the funeral home. You should go upstairs. You don't need to see this." "No," Darius said. "I want to stay. I want to make sure they take him." He wanted to see the body leave the house. He wanted to be absolutely certain that the obstacle was removed. Vance packed up his bag. "I will wait outside for the transport." The next hour was a blur of voices and movement. 2 men from the funeral home arrived. I felt myself being lifted, the canvas of the body bag cool against my skin. The zipper sound was loud final. Darkness swallowed me completely. I was carried out of my own house. I felt the cold night air seep through the bag as they wheeled me down the driveway. I heard the trunk of the hearse slam shut. As the engine started, I felt the vibration run through the metal floor of the vehicle. We began to move. I was dead. Officially. Legally. But inside that bag, my mind was racing. I was counting the minutes. Vance had the antidote at the funeral home. He would meet the hearse. He would wake me up. But until then, I had to trust. I had to wait. Back at the house, the mood shifted instantly. I wasn't there to see it, but I knew my son. I knew exactly what he was doing. As the taillights of the hearse faded into the distance, Darius didn't go back inside to mourn. He didn't call his relatives. He didn't sit in the dark and reflect on the man who had raised him. He walked to the middle of the driveway and let out a shout of triumph that echoed off the neighboring houses. "Yes!" he screamed. "Yes!" He ran back inside. I could imagine him tearing through the house. He went straight to my study. He opened the safe. He took out the blue bank book. He held it in his hands like a holy relic. $5 million. "Brenda," he yelled, "get the champagne." The good stuff. The stuff he was saving. I imagined them in the kitchen. Brenda popping the cork, the foam spilling over onto the floor where I had lain just hours before. Darius drinking straight from the bottle, the wine running down his chin. "We did it, baby," he would be saying. "We actually did it. We are rich. We are free." He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "Mr. Varga," he said, his voice thick with arrogance. "You can call off your dogs. The money is coming." The old man kicked the bucket. "Yeah. Tonight, I will have your cash by noon." He laughed. He hung up. He turned to the window, looking out at the dark street, at the world that he thought he now owned. "Goodbye, Dad," he whispered to the empty air. "Thanks for the memories. And the money." He poured another glass. He turned up the music. He started to dance. He danced on my grave. He danced in the house I built. He danced with the woman who had helped him kill me. He didn't know that the hearse wasn't going to the cemetery. He didn't know that the death certificate was a forgery. And he didn't know that the body he had just shipped off was already waking up, the drug wearing off, the rage fueling a resurrection that would make biblical history look like a parlor trick. "Enjoy the party, son," I thought as the darkness of the body bag began to lift. "Drink up. Because tomorrow the hangover is going to be lethal." I watched my own funeral from the back of a blacked-out SUV parked across the street from the Grace Apostolic Church. Ray had set up a live feed from inside the sanctuary, sending the video directly to a tablet in my lap. It was a surreal experience, sitting in the leather seat of a car, while 1,000 feet away, people were gathering to say goodbye to an empty casket. Darius had spared no expense. The church was filled with white lilies, thousands of them. The scent must have been suffocating. He had hired a choir that was currently singing a gospel hymn I had never liked. He bought the mahogany casket with the gold handles, the most expensive one in the catalog. It was all a show, a production, and he was the star. He stood at the front of the church near the altar wearing a black suit that fit him perfectly. He looked solemn, he looked grieving. He looked like the dutiful son who had just lost the patriarch of his family. But I knew better. I zoomed in on the screen. I saw the way his eyes darted around the room, not with sorrow, but with calculation. He wasn't counting blessings. He was counting heads. And he was counting money. The pews were packed. But they weren't filled with my friends. My friends were dead or too old to travel. The pews were filled with sharks. Darius had invited every business rival I had ever defeated. He had invited real estate developers, bankers, and investors. He had even invited the local alderman who I had refused to bribe 10 years ago. He wasn't mourning me, he was launching his brand. He was using my corpse as a stepping stone to announce to the Chicago elite that he was the new king. He was shaking hands, nodding gravely, accepting condolences with a practiced humility that made my stomach turn. I could read his lips as he spoke to a developer from the north side. Thank you, yes. It is a heavy burden. But I am ready to take the reins. We should do lunch next week. I have some ideas for the waterfront property. He was making deals over my dead body. He was selling pieces of my empire before the dirt had even hit the lid. The service began. The pastor, a man I had donated a new roof to last year, spoke about my generosity, my strength, my legacy. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know that the man lying in that box was actually a sandbag and some pillows. Then it was time for the eulogy. Darius walked to the pulpit. He paused for a moment, gripping the sides of the wood, looking down at his shoes. He let out a shaky breath. It was a masterclass in acting. If he had applied this much effort to his business, he wouldn't be in debt to the mob. My father, Darius, began, his voice trembling just enough to sound authentic, was a complicated man. He was hard, he was demanding, but he loved me, and he loved this city. He looked out at the crowd, tears glistening in his eyes, fake tears. He probably had an onion in his pocket. I remember when I was a boy, he continued launching into a story about a fishing trip we never took. He said he taught me that a man is defined by his word. That integrity is the only currency that matters. I scoffed in the quiet of the car. Integrity. This from the man who poisoned my chocolate, gassed my kitchen, and tried to inject me with insulin. The audacity was breathtaking. He went on for 20 minutes. He painted a portrait of a loving, supportive father-son relationship that never existed. He talked about how I had mentored him, how I had prepared him for this moment, how I had passed the torch to him in my final days. Dad knew his time was coming, Darius said, wiping his eyes with a silk handkerchief. And in his final hours, he told me he was proud of me. He told me that the king legacy was safe in my hands. He looked down at the casket, placing a hand on the polished wood. Rest easy, Dad. I have got it from here. He stepped down. The crowd murmured their approval. They saw a strong young heir ready to step up. They didn't see the parricide. They didn't see the monster. But then the doors at the back of the church opened. The heavy oak groaned. Heads turned. The murmuring stopped. Emily walked in. She wasn't wearing the veil of a grieving widow. She wasn't wearing the hysterics Darius had expected. She was wearing a simple, sharp black dress that looked like armor. She held my grandson's hand on her left and my granddaughter's hand on her right. She didn't look at the guests. She didn't look at the flowers. She looked straight ahead, her eyes locked on Darius like a laser. Her face was cold. It was a mask of absolute freezing fury. There were no tears. She had cried enough tears for a lifetime in the grocery store aisle. Now she was done crying. Now she was ready for war. Darius froze halfway to his seat. He hadn't expected her. He thought she was broken. He thought she was packing boxes in the suburbs, terrified and defeated. He didn't expect her to walk into his coronation and suck the air out of the room. Emily walked down the center aisle. The click of her heels on the stone floor echoed in the silence. She didn't stop at the family pew in the front row where Brenda was sitting, looking uncomfortable in a hat that was too big for her. Emily walked past them. She didn't acknowledge Brenda. She didn't acknowledge Darius. She walked to the second row on the opposite side, the side reserved for distant relatives. She sat down, pulling her children close to her. It was a statement. It was a public declaration of war. She was separating herself from him. She was separating my grandchildren from their father. Darius stared at her, his jaw tight. He looked furious. He made a small motion with his hand, urging her to come to the front to play the part of the grieving daughter-in-law. Emily met his gaze. She didn't move. She just stared at him with that cold, dead look until he was the one who had to look away. The tension in the room was palpable. The guests sensed it. The business partners shifted in their seats. They smelled blood in the water. The service concluded. The pastor announced that the burial would be private, but that the family invited everyone to a reception at the King estate. Darius stood up again, recovering his composure. He smiled at the front row at the investors and the bankers. "Please," he announced, his voice booming, "join us at the house. My father would have wanted us to celebrate his life, not mourn his death. We have the finest catering. We have vintage wine. Let us toast to the future of King Enterprises." He was eager to get the party started. He was eager to get back to the house where he thought $5 million was waiting for him in the safe. But before anyone could move, a man stepped out from the shadows of the choir loft. It was Goldberg, my lawyer. He was a small man with thick glasses and a suit that looked like he had slept in it, but he had a voice that could cut glass. "Excuse me," Goldberg said. He didn't use a microphone, but his voice carried to the back of the room. Darius turned annoyed. "Mr. Goldberg, this is hardly the time for legalities. We can discuss the estate next week." "I am afraid not," Goldberg said, walking to the center of the altar. He stood next to the casket, his hand resting on it possessively. He looked at Darius, then he looked at the crowd. "Mr. Lucius King left very specific instructions regarding his funeral and his will," Goldberg announced. Darius laughed a nervous, dismissive sound. "My father was confused at the end. We have a guardianship order. I am the executor." "The guardianship order applied to a living man," Goldberg said sharply. "That man is dead. The will takes precedence." And Mr. King's instructions were explicit. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a remote control. He stipulated that immediately following the service, before any reception, before any burial, his last will and testament be read to the gathered assembly. "Read here," Darius shouted, losing his cool. "That is insane. Wills are read in offices. This is a funeral. Have some respect." "It was a request," Goldberg said. "A condition of the inheritance. If the will is not read here now in front of these witnesses, the assets are frozen for a year pending probate review." That stopped Darius cold. Frozen for a year. He didn't have a year. He didn't have a week. He had 48 hours to pay the butcher. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the bankers. He tried to smile, but it looked like a rictus of pain. "Well," he said, spreading his hands, "if it was my father's wish, we must honor it. Let's get it over with." He sat down, crossing his arms, looking confident. He thought he knew what was in the will. He thought he was the sole beneficiary. He thought this was just an old man's eccentricity. Goldberg didn't pull out a paper document. He didn't put on reading glasses. He pointed the remote at the large projection screen that had been lowered behind the choir, usually used for hymn lyrics. "Mr. King didn't want me to read the will," Goldberg said. "He wanted to read it himself." Darius frowned. "Himself." Goldberg pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. The lights in the church dimmed. A giant image of me appeared on the screen. I was sitting in my study wearing my favorite smoking jacket, holding a glass of cognac. I looked healthy. I looked strong. I looked alive. The room went dead silent. On the screen I smiled. It was a wolfish smile. "Hello everyone," the video me said. "Thank you for coming. I see a lot of sharks in the pews. I hope you are hungry. But before we talk about who gets what we need to talk about how I died." Darius stood up. His face was the color of ash. "Turn it off!" he yelled. "This is inappropriate. Turn it off!" "Sit down," Mr. King, Goldberg barked. "Or do you want to forfeit the estate right now?" Darius sat. He gripped the pew in front of him so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked at the screen. He looked at the eyes of his father staring down at him from beyond the grave. And in that moment, he knew. He didn't know how and he didn't know why, but he knew that the trap hadn't snapped shut on me. It had snapped shut on him. The projection screen washed the sanctuary in a cold blue light cutting through the gloom of the church like a searchlight. The image was crisp, high definition. It was me. Not the corpse supposedly rotting in the mahogany box with the gold handles, but the man who had built a dynasty on the South Side. I was sitting in my study wearing my favorite silk smoking jacket, the deep burgundy one that Viola had bought me for our 30th anniversary. I held a snifter of cognac in one left hand and that damnable red velvet box in the other. I watched from the SUV outside. On my tablet screen, I saw the reaction in real time. The silence in the church was absolute. It was the kind of silence you get right after a car crash before the screaming starts. "Hello, Darius," the digital version of me said. His voice, my voice, boomed through the church speakers, distorted slightly by the echo of the vaulted ceiling. "If you are watching this, then the performance is over. The curtain has fallen, and I am dead." I saw Darius in the front pew. He looked like he had been electrocuted. His skin had turned the color of wet ash. He was gripping the back of the pew in front of him so hard his knuckles were white, as if he were trying to anchor himself to the earth before gravity gave out. He tried to stand up, his legs twitching but his knees buckled. He sat back down heavily. He couldn't look away from the screen. It was hypnotic. It was his nightmare broadcast in 4K resolution. The question is, Video Lucius continued swirling the cognac in the snifter, the amber liquid catching the light. How did I go? Did I go peacefully in my sleep like Dr. Vance wrote on the certificate? Did my old heart just give out tired of beating for an ungrateful world? I paused on the screen. I looked directly into the camera lens. I wanted Darius to feel like I was looking right through his skull. Or was it something else? I lifted the red velvet box. I untied the gold ribbon with agonizing slowness. The sound of the ribbon sliding against the fabric was amplified by the speakers. Swish, was it the Belgian chocolate, son? The one you sent me for my birthday? The one with the special truffle in the center? The one laced with enough digoxin to stop a rhino's heart? A gasp ripped through the church. It started in the front row with the bankers and the investors and rippled back to the cheap seats where the curious neighbors sat. Necks craned, eyes widened. People shifted away from Darius as if he were radioactive. This wasn't a eulogy. It wasn't a reading of assets. It was an indictment from beyond the grave. Lies, Darius screamed. He jumped to his feet, finding his voice. It was shrill, hysterical cracking under the pressure. He pointed a trembling finger at the screen. This is fake. He is crazy. He was senile. This is a deep fake. It is AI. Turn it off. He spun around to face Goldberg. Turn it off. Turn it off right now, or I will sue you into the ground. I am the heir. I order you to stop this. Goldberg didn't flinch. He stood by the casket like a gargoyle, stone-faced and immovable. The video plays in its entirety. Mr. King Goldberg said, his voice cutting through Darius's panic. Or you forfeit the estate. Sit down. Darius looked at the doors. He looked at the exit, but he couldn't leave. If he left, he lost the money. If he lost the money, the butcher would find him. He was trapped in a prison of his own greed. He sank back into the pew, burying his face in his hands. On the screen, I popped a chocolate into my mouth. I chewed it slowly. I smiled. It was a wolfish smile. It wasn't the chocolate, was it, Darius? Because I didn't eat it. I saved it. I sent it to a lab. I have the toxicology report right here on my desk. I tapped a piece of paper on the video. Darius flinched as if I had slapped him. So maybe it was the fall. I continued. The olive oil on the stairs, the gravity, did that do it? Or maybe it was the needle. I leaned forward. The camera zoomed in on my face until my eyes filled the screen. The insulin, Darius. The overdose you tried to force Brenda to give me while I was sleeping 3 nights ago. Did that finally do the trick? Did you finally get the clean kill you wanted? The church erupted. It wasn't just gasps now. It was murmurs, angry whispers. People were standing up. The developers in the front row were checking their phones, probably texting their legal teams to distance themselves from King Enterprises. Darius looked at Brenda. She was sitting 2 seats away from him. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. She looked like a rat on a sinking ship. She was looking at the side door, calculating the distance. You want my money? Video, Lucius said, his voice dropping to a low growl. You want the keys to the kingdom. You want to pay off the butcher before he cuts you into pieces. Darius froze. His head snapped up. He stared at the screen with pure terror. I know about the debt, son, I said. I know about the $2 million. I know about the gambling. I know about the deadline. The mention of the butcher changed the atmosphere in the room. The sharks in the pews knew that name. They knew what it meant. They realized instantly that Darius wasn't just a bad son. He was a dead man walking. They started to grab their coats. The funeral was over. The scandal was just beginning. But we are not done yet, I said on the screen. Before we get to the reading of the assets, before we talk about who gets the millions, I have one last gift for you. I reached down beside my chair in the video. A parting gift from a father to the son who tried to murder him. Consider it your inheritance, Darius. It is the only thing you earned. The screen faded to black for a second. The church held its breath. Darius was trembling so hard the pew was shaking. He wanted to run, but he was paralyzed by the horror of what was coming next. A loading icon appeared on the screen. Spinning. Spinning. Watch closely, Darius, my voice said from the darkness of the speakers. This is your legacy. The screen flickered back to life. But it wasn't me anymore. It was grainy footage. Night vision. It was the interior of a bedroom. My bedroom. It was the footage from the hidden camera in the linen closet. And the show was about to begin. The screen behind the altar flickered the high-definition image of my living self vanishing into a burst of static before resolving into something grittier, darker. It was the grainy, greenish hue of night vision. The timestamp in the corner read, 3 weeks ago. The angle was high, looking down from the corner of the ceiling. It was the footage from the pinhole camera I had installed in the guest bathroom medicine cabinet. I sat in the SUV outside, my hands gripping the tablet so hard my knuckles ached. This was it. The autopsy of my son's character played out on a 20-foot screen for all of Chicago to see. On the screen, Darius entered the bathroom. The church was silent, a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed down on the lungs. Every eye was glued to the projection. They watched as my son, the man who had just delivered a tearful eulogy about integrity, opened the medicine cabinet. They watched him pull the unmarked vial from his pocket. They watched the steady, practiced way he swapped my heart medication for the poison he had procured. A murmur rippled through the pews, starting low and rising like a tide. It wasn't just shock. It was revulsion. The bankers in the front row, men who would sell their own mothers for a percentage point, looked ill. They were watching a man casually prepare to murder his father between courses of a family dinner. On the screen, Darius looked at himself in the mirror after the swap. He smiled. It was that smirk again, that arrogant, self-satisfied twist of the lips that I had hated since he was a teenager. He winked at his reflection. "You sick son of a bitch," someone whispered loudly from the back. It sounded like my old foreman, Mike. Darius was frozen in the front pew. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at the floor. His shoulders hunched, his hands gripping his knees. He was shaking violently. He knew what was coming next. He knew the archive was deep. The video cut to black, then snapped back to life. This time the audio was crystal clear. It was the recording from the kitchen the morning of the gas leak. "We make him lose his mind." Benjamin's voice, "No." Darius's voice echoed through the sanctuary. The name slipped in my mind for a second, a ghost from another story. But the malice was the same. "We switch the meds. We hide the keys. In a month, any doctor will certify he is incompetent." Brenda's voice chimed in shrill and cruel. "It is pathetic. He is just a burden." In the church real life, Brenda let out a sob. She tried to stand up, tried to scuttle toward the side aisle, but the wife of the alderman sitting next to her grabbed her arm. "Sit down," the woman hissed. "You are going to watch this." Darius whipped his head around, glaring at Brenda with pure hatred, as if this were her fault, as if she had forced him to be a monster. The screen flickered again. The final clip, the nail in the coffin. It was the footage from the linen closet, the night of the failed injection. The lighting was poor, slicing through the darkness of the maid's room, but the audio was perfect. It captured every heavy breath, every rustle of fabric. "Just do it," Darius's recorded voice growled. "Find a vein." The image showed the beam of the flashlight cutting across my sleeping face. It showed the glint of the needle in Brenda's shaking hand. It showed the look on Darius's face. Impatience, greed, a total lack of humanity. "If the needle won't do it, the video," Darius said, pulling the gun from his jacket. "Then this will." The church erupted. People jumped to their feet. Screams rang out. This wasn't financial fraud. This wasn't elder abuse. This was attempted execution. The investors in the front row were scrambling over each other to get to the aisle, desperate to distance themselves from the man on the screen. They didn't want their brands associated with a patricidal maniac. Darius stood up. He looked around wildly. The walls were closing in. The eyes of the crowd were like lasers burning him alive. He looked at the screen where his own face was twisted in a murderous snarl. "Stop it!" he screamed. His voice cracked high and thin. "It is a deep fake. It is AI generated. He hated me. He set me up." He pointed a trembling finger at Goldberg. "You did this. You and that old bastard. You fabricated this." Goldberg didn't flinch. He stood his ground by the empty casket, his face a mask of stone. "The truth is not a fabrication, Mr. King. It is the only thing you cannot bribe." The video changed one last time. It wasn't a hidden camera footage now. It was the security footage from the driveway taken just 48 hours ago. It showed Darius throwing Emily's suitcases down the stairs. It showed him grabbing her arm, his face contorted with rage. It showed my grandchildren crying, clinging to their mother's legs. "Get out the video," Darius screamed. "I am the king now. I don't need your dead weight." The audio was piercing. It cut through the chaos in the church. Emily, sitting in the second row, didn't look at the screen. She looked at her children covering their ears, burying their faces in her dress. She was a statue of endurance. She had survived him. And now she was watching him burn. That was the breaking point. Darius let out a howl. It was a sound of pure animalistic madness. He couldn't talk his way out of this. He couldn't pay his way out. The evidence was overwhelming, visceral, and public. His reputation was incinerated. His freedom was gone. The butcher would know he had failed. The police would be on their way. He had nothing left but rage. He lunged. He scrambled over the back of the pew, kicking aside the hymnals, his expensive shoes slipping on the polished wood. He didn't run for the door. He ran for the altar. He ran for the screen. He wanted to destroy the image. He wanted to smash the mirror that was showing him his own soul. "Shut it off!" he shrieked, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. Shut it off. He knocked over a flower stand, sending white lilies cascading across the floor like spilled milk. He shoved a deacon who tried to step in his way. He was a bull in a china shop, a force of destruction aimed at the truth. Goldberg stepped back, clutching his briefcase to his chest, his eyes wide behind his thick glasses. He wasn't a fighter. He was a lawyer. He looked toward the back of the church, toward the doors, waiting for the signal. Darius reached the projector screen. He grabbed the fabric with both hands and ripped. The sound of tearing canvas was loud like a gunshot. The image of his own cruelty distorted and warped as he tore it down, but the projector kept playing, casting the light of his crimes onto the back wall of the chancel, onto the cross itself. He turned on the projector, smashing it with his fist, burning his hand on the hot bulb. He didn't care. He was screaming unintelligible curses, flailing, fighting an enemy he couldn't touch. He grabbed the heavy brass candlestick from the altar. He swung it around, his eyes wild, searching for a target. He looked at Goldberg. He looked at Emily. "I will kill you all," he roared. "You think you can humiliate me? I am Darius King. I built this. I own this." He raised the candlestick, ready to bring it down on the empty casket, ready to smash the last symbol of his father. The crowd recoiled. The panic was palpable. This was no longer a funeral service. It was a crime scene in progress. Darius raised the brass weapon high above his head. His chest heaved. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a demon possessed. "Stop!" The word wasn't shouted. It wasn't a scream. It was spoken with a voice of absolute crushing authority. It was a voice that had commanded construction sites, negotiated with unions, and silenced boardrooms for 40 years. It came from the back of the church, from the main double doors that led to the street. Darius froze. The candlestick hovered in the air. He knew that voice. It was the voice of his conscience. It was the voice of his nightmares. It was the voice of the man he had murdered 3 times over. He lowered his arms slowly. He turned around. The entire congregation turned with him, a wave of motion rippling through the pews. The heavy oak doors at the back of the nave swung open. The bright winter light from the street poured in, blinding for a moment, silhouetting the figure standing on the threshold. A man stood there. He was wearing a black trench coat over a hospital gown, leaning heavily on a cane but standing upright. He looked old. He looked tired. But his eyes burned with a fire that could melt steel. "Stop, son," the figure said again, stepping into the sanctuary. Darius dropped the candlestick. It hit the floor with a deafening clang. "Dad," he whispered. "It was me, Lucius King, and I had come back from the dead to collect my debt." I walked into the church of my own funeral. The winter sunlight that flooded in behind me turned my silhouette into a long, dark shadow that stretched all the way to the altar, touching the tips of my son's expensive Italian shoes. I leaned heavily on my cane, the rubber tip digging into the plush red carpet of the center aisle. I was wearing a hospital gown tucked into trousers I had borrowed from Ray, and a black trench coat that smelled of stale coffee and cigarettes. I didn't look like a tycoon. I didn't look like the man who had built skyscrapers. I looked like a specter. I looked like Judgment Day. The silence in the sanctuary was absolute. A moment ago there had been screaming, crashing metal, and the chaotic energy of a riot. Now there was only the sound of my breathing and the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of my cane against the floor. The guests in the pews, the sharks and the vultures who had come to pick over my bones, shrank back as I passed. They pulled their legs in. They averted their eyes. They were terrified. To them I was a dead man walking. I was a glitch in the matrix of their reality. I kept my eyes locked on Darius. He was standing by the altar, the heavy brass candlestick lying at his feet where he had dropped it. His face was a mask of total shattering comprehension. His mouth hung open slack and wet. His eyes were bulging, darting from my face to the empty casket and back again. He was trying to solve an equation that didn't have an answer. He was trying to understand how a corpse could walk through the front door. "You are dead," he whispered, the sound carried in the acoustic perfection of the church. "I saw you die." Vance declared it. The certificate, the hearse. I didn't answer him. I just kept walking. Tap, tap, tap. I passed the row where Emily sat. She didn't look surprised. She looked relieved. She pulled her children closer, shielding them from the sight of their father's disintegration, but she met my gaze. She nodded once. A soldier acknowledging her general. I nodded back. I passed Brenda. She had collapsed into the pew, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with silent sobs. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying because she knew that the man walking down the aisle was the only witness to her crime who mattered. She knew that her freedom had just walked in the door and it was wearing a trench coat. I reached the front of the church. I stepped up onto the chancel. My legs were weak from the drugs, from the stress, from the sheer weight of 74 years of living, but my rage held me upright. I stood next to the mahogany casket Darius had bought with my money. I ran my hand along the smooth, cold wood. It was a nice box. It was a shame it was empty. I turned to face the congregation. I looked at the bankers who had frozen my accounts. I looked at the developers who had been planning to carve up my land. I looked at the politicians who had come to make sure I was really gone. "Get out," I said. My voice was low gravelly, but it filled the room. They didn't move. They were paralyzed. I slammed my cane against the side of the casket. It made a hollow booming sound like a war drum. "Get out, unless you want to be named as accomplices in a federal murder investigation." That broke the spell. The panic that had been simmering exploded. People scrambled over each other to get to the aisles. Coats were left behind. Purses were dropped. Dignity was abandoned in the rush for the exits. The sharks weren't hungry anymore. They were the bait, and they knew it. Within 2 minutes, the church was empty. The heavy doors swung shut, cutting off the light, leaving only the dim religious glow of the sanctuary lamps. It was just us now. The family, me, Darius, Emily, Brenda, and Goldberg, who stood by the projector screen, wiping his glasses, looking like he had just won the biggest case of his life. I turned back to Darius. He hadn't moved. He couldn't move. He was shaking so violently that his teeth were chattering. He looked small. He looked like a boy who had broken a window and was waiting for the belt. But he wasn't a boy. He was a 40-year-old man who had tried to kill his father 3 times in 1 week. "Dad," he stammered. "Dad, please. I thought you were sick. I thought it was mercy." "Mercy," I repeated. The word tasted like bile. "You call poisoning my birthday gift mercy. You call gassing my kitchen mercy. You call trying to inject me with insulin while I slept mercy." I took a step toward him. He flinched, raising his hands to protect his face. "You didn't want mercy, Darius. You wanted money. You wanted to pay off your bookie. You wanted to save your own skin by peeling off mine." No, it wasn't like that," he sobbed, falling to his knees. "It was Varga, the butcher. He forced me. He said he would kill me. I was scared, Dad. I was so scared." I looked down at him. I remembered the day he was born. I remembered holding him, promising to protect him from the world. I had failed. I had protected him too much. I had sheltered him from consequences until he thought they didn't apply to him. "And because you were scared, you decided I had to die?" I asked. "Because you made a mistake, I had to pay the price." He grabbed the hem of my trench coat. Please, Dad. I am your son, your only son. You can't do this. We can fix it. I will go to rehab. I will change. Just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you staged it to teach me a lesson. Please, don't let them take me." I looked at his hands clutching my coat. They were the same hands that had swapped my medicine. They were the same hands that had held the gun. I pulled my coat free from his grip. I stepped back, putting distance between us. I needed him to see me clearly. I needed him to see that the bridge between us wasn't just burned. It was dust. "You are right, Darius," I said. "I did teach you a lesson. But you didn't learn it. You think this is a game. You think you can cry and beg and I will write a check and make the bad men go away. But the checkbook is closed. I pointed my cane at his chest. The tip hovered over his heart. You stood there, I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had held back for days. You stood right there 10 minutes ago. You put your hand on this casket. You looked these people in the eye and you lied. You talked about love. You talked about legacy. You buried me in your mind, Darius. I leaned in closer. You killed the father in your mind, I hissed. You mourned me. You moved on. You drank my whiskey and danced in my house. In your heart, I was already dead. Darius looked up at me, his eyes streaming tears. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I straightened up. I looked at the cross hanging above the altar. I looked at the stained glass windows. But I am not a memory, Darius. I said, I am not a ghost. I am flesh and blood. And I am still alive. I turned to Goldberg. Is it time, I asked? Goldberg checked his watch. It is time, Mr. King. Darius looked between us. Time for what? Dad, what is happening? I looked at my son one last time. I didn't feel hate anymore. I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound, hollow emptiness. The space where my love for him used to be was now just a scar. I am alive, Darius, I said softly. And I am here to put you in prison. Darius scrambled to his feet. Prison. No. You can't. I am your family. You can't send your family to prison. You stopped being my family the moment you opened that medicine cabinet, I said. He looked around wildly. He looked at the side exits. He looked at the stained glass windows. He was calculating the jump. He was thinking about running. Don't bother, I said. Why, he screamed. Why are you doing this? Because you broke the one rule, Darius. You bit the hand that fed you. And now the hand is making a fist. Suddenly, the air in the church changed. The silence was shattered, not by a voice but by a sound from outside, the sound of heavy tires on pavement, the sound of doors slamming, lots of doors. The stained glass windows flashed with red and blue lights. The siren wail that I had simulated in my house was now real, multiplied by 10. It came from every direction. Darius spun toward the main doors. Boom! The doors flew open again. But this time it wasn't an old man with a cane. It was a wall of black uniforms. It was the glint of badges. It was the leveled barrels of automatic rifles. FBIA voice boomed through a megaphone. Nobody move. Men in tactical gear swarmed into the sanctuary. They poured in from the side entrances, from the choir loft, from the vestry. They moved with the precision of a machine. Darius stood in the center of the chaos alone. He looked at the police. He looked at me. You called the feds, he whispered. I didn't just call them, son, I said, turning my back on him. I gave them the keys. I walked toward Emily. I walked toward the future. And I left my son to face the past he had created. The sanctuary of Grace Apostolic Church had turned into a federal crime scene. The air, once heavy with the scent of lilies and lies, was now vibrating with the shouts of agents and the static of radios. I stood by the altar, leaning on my cane, watching the finale of the tragedy my son had written for himself. 2 agents hauled Darius off his knees. He wasn't fighting them physically. He was too much of a coward for that. He was fighting with his mouth. He was spitting words like venom, trying to poison everyone around him to save his own skin. The handcuffs snapped onto his wrists. Click, click. The sound was more final than the closing of a coffin lid. It wasn't my idea, Darius screamed, thrashing in the grip of the agents. His eyes were wild, darting from face to face, looking for a scapegoat. He looked at Brenda, who was being cuffed in the pew. It was her. She is the nurse. She gave the injection. She told me it would be painless. She forced me. Brenda's head snapped up. Her mascara was running down her face in black rivers. She looked at Darius with a look of pure, unadulterated loathing. The love affair was over. The survival instinct had kicked in. You lying snake, she shrieked. You paid me $50,000. I have the wire transfer. I have the texts. You told me your father was a vegetable. You told me it was a mercy killing. She turned to the nearest FBI agent, desperate to make a deal. I want immunity, she yelled. I can give you everything. I know where he hides the cash. I know about the shell companies. Darius froze. Shut up, Brenda. Shut up. She didn't shut up. She poured it all out. It is in the storage unit on 4th Street, she babbled, the words tumbling over each other. Unit 404, there is a false wall in the back. He keeps the ledgers there. He keeps the cash from the construction scams. He is laundering money for the Surkovs. I saw the books. Darius let out a roar of incoherent rage. He lunged at her, dragging the agents with him, but they slammed him back against the nearest pew. Liar, he screamed. She is a junkie. She is lying. I watched them tear each other apart. It was pathetic. It was ugly, but it was necessary. Then Emily stepped forward. She walked out from the row where she had been shielding her children. She walked right up to the lead agent, a tall man with a stone face. She reached into her purse. She didn't pull out a handkerchief. She pulled out a thick manila envelope. Darius saw it. His face went from red to white in a heartbeat. Emily, he gasped. Don't. Baby, please. Think about us. Think about the kids. Emily looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. It wasn't hate. It wasn't love. It was the look of someone taking out the trash. I am thinking about the kids, Darius. She said, her voice calm and cold in the chaos. That is why I am doing this. She handed the envelope to the agent. This is the insurance policy he forged, she said clearly. And these are the bank statements he tried to hide. It shows the transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands. It shows the payments to the online casinos. And it shows the life insurance premiums paid from his father's stolen identity. Darius stared at her. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. The betrayal was total. His mistress had sold him out for a plea deal. His wife had sold him out for justice. He was alone. The agent opened the envelope. He glanced at the documents. He looked at Darius. Darius King, the agent said, "You are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and the attempted murder of Lucius King." They began to drag him toward the main doors. The crowd of former guests parted like the Red Sea, nobody wanting to touch him, nobody wanting to look him in the eye. The sharks, who had come to feast on my estate, were now witnessing the slaughter of the heir. As they dragged him past the altar, Darius dug his heels into the carpet. He fought them. He wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to stop. He wanted one last look. "Wait," he grunted. "Wait." He looked up at me. I stood on the chancel steps, looking down at the son I had raised, the son I had protected, the son I had loved more than my own life. I didn't see the boy anymore. I saw a stranger. I saw a man who had traded his soul for a seat at a table where he didn't belong. Our eyes met. I waited for the apology. I waited for the regret. I waited for him to say, "I am sorry, Dad." But Darius didn't apologize. His face twisted into a sneer of pure malice. His eyes burned with a hatred so deep it felt like a physical blow. He stopped fighting the agents. He stood tall for a second, gathering the last shreds of his arrogance. "Why didn't you just die?" he spat. The words echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Why didn't you just eat the chocolate? Why didn't you just sleep? You are old. You are done. You had your time. Why couldn't you just die and save me the trouble?" The silence that followed was heavier than the casket behind me. It was the silence of a bond breaking forever. I looked at him. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a strange, hollow peace. "Because, son," I said softly, "I still had one last lesson to teach you." The agents yanked him forward. "Get him out of here!" Darius screamed as they dragged him through the doors. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of frustration. A scream of a spoiled child who had finally been told no. The doors slammed shut. The sirens wailed outside, fading into the distance. I stood alone at the altar. The church was empty of enemies. Emily walked up the steps. She stood beside me. She took my hand. Her hand was warm. "It is over, Lucius," she whispered. I looked at the empty casket. I looked at the cross. "No, Emily," I said. "It is not over. Now comes the hard part. Now we have to live with it." I squeezed her hand. We walked down the aisle together, leaving the ghosts behind us. I had won the war. But looking at the empty space where my son used to be, I knew that the victory was just another kind of loss. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and stale anxiety. It was a smell I knew well from decades of contract disputes and zoning hearings, but today it filled my lungs like toxic gas. I sat in the witness box, my hands resting on the smooth wood of the railing. I was wearing my best charcoal suit, the one I used to wear when I was closing a deal that would change the skyline of Chicago. But today, I wasn't closing a deal. I was closing the book on my own son. Darius sat at the defense table. He wasn't wearing Italian silk anymore. He was wearing a county orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost weight in the 6 months he had spent in county jail awaiting trial. His head was shaved. His eyes, once bright with arrogance and greed, were now sunken and darting around the room like trapped rats. He looked at the jury, he looked at his lawyer, he looked at the exit signs. But he wouldn't look at me. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ms. Sterling, who had built the case brick by brick, stood up. She walked toward me, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. "Mr. King," she said, her voice projecting to the back of the room where the reporters were scribbling furiously. "You have heard the evidence. You have seen the videos. You have heard the audio recordings of your son plotting your murder. Is there any doubt in your mind, any doubt at all, that Darius King intended to end your life?" I looked at Darius. I waited for him to lift his head. I wanted him to see me. Finally, he looked up. There was no remorse in his face, only a pleading, desperate calculation. He was silently begging me to soften the blow, to say I was confused, to say it was all a misunderstanding. He still thought he could manipulate me. He still thought I was the father who wrote checks to make the bad things go away. I turned back to the prosecutor. "No," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't tremble. "There is no doubt. My son tried to poison me with chocolate. He tried to gas me in my own kitchen. And when that failed, he tried to inject me with a lethal dose of insulin while I slept. He didn't want a father. He wanted a payout." A murmur went through the jury box. The defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer who looked like he knew he was fighting a losing battle, didn't even object. The evidence was too overwhelming. The video of the insulin incident filmed by Emily from the closet had been played 3 times. It was damning. It was undeniable. Darius slumped in his chair. He knew the walls were closing in. But he had one card left to play, the mercy card. The mercy. When it was the defense's turn, the lawyer stood up. He buttoned his jacket and approached me with a look of practiced sympathy. "Mr. King," he said softly, "we are not disputing the events, but we are looking at the context. Your son was in debt. He was threatened by organized crime. He was desperate. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was a man pushed to the brink." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You are his father, Mr. King. You raised him. You know him better than anyone. Do you believe in your heart of hearts that he belongs in a maximum security prison for the rest of his life? Do you want to see your only son die behind bars?" The courtroom went silent. This was the moment. This was the moment where fathers usually break. This was the moment where the victim turns into the protector. The lawyer was banking on my biological imperative to save my offspring. He was banking on the guilt of a parent. I looked at the judge. I looked at the jury. And then I looked at Darius. He was crying now. Real tears or fake, it didn't matter. He was mouthing the words, "I am sorry, Dad." He was trying to conjure the image of the little boy I used to take to baseball games. I leaned into the microphone. "I raised him," I said. "I fed him. I clothed him. I taught him right from wrong. I gave him every opportunity I never had. I built a world for him so he wouldn't have to struggle in the mud like I did." I paused. Darius looked hopeful. He thought I was building a defense for him. And because I did all those things, I continued, my voice hardening like concrete setting in the sun. "I am the one who has to stop him." Darius's face fell. The lawyer frowned. "Mr. King, I am asking if you want leniency for your son, and I am telling you no," I said. "I brought him into this world. I am responsible for him. And when you bring something into the world that turns into a monster, you don't let it roam free because you love it. You put it in a cage so it cannot hurt anyone else." I pointed a finger at Darius. He didn't just try to kill me because he was desperate. He tried to kill me because he thought he was entitled to my life. He thought my hard work was his piggy bank. He destroyed his wife. He traumatized his children. He betrayed every value I tried to instill in him. If I ask for mercy now, I am not being a good father. I am being an accomplice. I sat back. I helped make him, I said finality. Now I have to help stop him. That is my burden, not his. The defense lawyer stepped back stunned. He had no more questions. Darius had his head on the table, sobbing loudly now. But the jury wasn't looking at him with pity. They were looking at him with the cold, hard eyes of judgment. They saw what I saw. A predator who had finally been cornered. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the 1st degree. Insurance fraud. Conspiracy. Then came the sentencing. The judge asked Darius if he had anything to say. Darius stood up. He was shaking. He looked at me one last time. "I just wanted to be like you," he whispered. "I just wanted to be a king. You never understood what it meant to be a king, I thought. You thought it meant the crown. You didn't know it meant the weight. The judge looked down at him. He adjusted his glasses. Darius King, for the attempted murder of your father and for the callous disregard for human life you have displayed, I sentence you to 30 years in the state penitentiary. 30 years. The gavel banged. The sound echoed in my chest. 30 years. He was 38. He would be an old man when he got out, if he got out. The bailiffs moved in. They pulled Darius's hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked. It was a sharp mechanical sound, the sound of a door closing forever. Darius didn't scream this time. He didn't fight. He just looked at me. His eyes were empty. The fire was gone. The greed was gone. There was only the long, dark tunnel of the future stretching out before him. They led him away. He shuffled out the side door, the chains on his ankles clinking. He didn't look back. I sat in the courtroom until everyone else had left. The reporters packed up their cameras. The jury filed out. The judge retired to his chambers. I was alone. I stood up. My knees ached. I felt old. I felt heavy. I had won. I had survived. I had defeated the enemy. But the victory tasted like ash. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Chicago afternoon. The sun was shining, reflecting off the skyscrapers I had helped build. The city was moving alive, indifferent to the tragedy that had just played out. Emily was waiting for me at the bottom of the steps. She wasn't alone. My grandchildren were there. They ran to me when they saw me. Grandpa, they yelled, hugging my legs. I looked down at them. Innocent, bright, unbroken. I looked at Emily. She smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was real. "Is it over?" she asked. "It is over," I said. I took the hands of my grandchildren. I felt their small, warm fingers in my rough, calloused palms. "Let's go get some ice cream," I said. I didn't look back at the courthouse. I didn't look back at the prison bus that was pulling away from the loading dock. I had paid the price. I had cut off the limb to save the body. It hurt. It would always hurt. But as I walked down the street with the future of my family holding my hands, I knew I had done the only thing a father could do. I had protected the legacy, not the money, the name. And now it was time to rebuild. I sold the house 3 weeks after the verdict. I didn't wait for the market to turn. I didn't wait for the highest bidder. I sold it to a young family from the suburbs who didn't know the history, who didn't know that the foyer was a stage for a fake death, or that the kitchen was where a son had tried to gas his father. I walked out of that mansion with a single suitcase. I left the furniture. I left the ghosts. I left the echo of Darius's laughter in the living room. It was just brick and mortar now. The home part had died a long time ago. I moved into a small bungalow on the edge of the city. It has a porch, a patch of grass, and neighbors who wave when you walk by. It is quiet. It is the kind of place where you can hear yourself think, where you don't have to look over your shoulder. But retirement wasn't about sitting still. I had one last deal to close, one last structure to build. But this one wasn't made of steel and glass. It was made of flour and sugar. I met Emily on a Tuesday morning in a rundown commercial district that was just starting to see green shoots of gentrification. She was waiting for me on the sidewalk, holding the hands of my 2 grandchildren. She looked different. The fear was gone from her eyes. The hunch in her shoulders that came from living with a monster had vanished. She stood straight. She looked tired. Yes, the kind of tired that comes from working double shifts to put food on the table, but she looked free. Grandpa, the kids yelled, running to hug my legs. I knelt down, my knees creaking, and hugged them back. I smelled their shampoo, their innocence. They were the only pure thing left in this mess. "Hello, Lucius," Emily said, smiling. Her smile was genuine. It reached her eyes. "Hello, Emily," I said. I stood up and pointed to the building behind her. It was an old bakery that had closed down 5 years ago. The windows were dusty. The sign was faded. But the bones were good. I had inspected the foundation myself. "What are we doing here?" she asked. I pulled a set of keys from my pocket. I unlocked the front door. "Come inside." We walked into the dusty space. It smelled of old yeast and potential. There were industrial ovens in the back covered in tarps. There were display cases that just needed a little polish. "I bought the building," I said. Emily stopped. She looked around. "Why? You are retired." "I am," I said, "but you are not." I walked over to one of the dusty tables and wiped it clean with my handkerchief. I pulled a thick envelope from my jacket. I know you always wanted to open a bakery, Emily. I know Darius wouldn't let you. He said it was menial work. He said a king wife doesn't wear an apron. Emily looked down. He did say that. He said I was embarrassing him. He was an idiot. I said, my voice echoing in the empty room. He didn't understand that there is dignity in feeding people. There is honor in creating something with your hands. I handed her the envelope. This is the deed to the building, I said, and a cashier's check. Enough to renovate, buy supplies, and operate for 2 years without making a profit. Emily stared at the envelope. She didn't take it. She backed away. Lucius, I can't. This is too much. I can't take your money. I testified because it was the right thing to do, not for a payoff. It is not a payoff, Emily. It is an investment. I took her hand. It was calloused from the cleaning work she'd been doing since the separation. Listen to me, I said. When Darius brought you home 10 years ago, I judged you. I am ashamed to admit it, but I did. I thought you were too quiet. I thought you were weak. I thought you were just another pretty face he had picked up to look good at parties. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. I tested you, Emily. For 10 years I watched you. I saw you put up with his temper. I saw you raise these children with love while he was out gambling. I saw you try to hold the family together with nothing but duct tape and prayer. I let you suffer because I wanted to see if you would break. Tears welled up in her eyes. I was wrong, I said. You didn't break, you endured. And when the time came when the fire was hottest, you didn't run away. You stood up. You saved my life. You are the strongest person I know. You are the king I wanted Darius to be. I pressed the envelope into her hand. You are the daughter I never had, Emily. I should have told you sooner. I should have protected you sooner. I am sorry I waited until the world fell apart to show you respect. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. She didn't say anything. She just lunged forward and hugged me. She hugged me so hard I almost lost my balance. We stood there in the dusty bakery, an old man and the daughter-in-law. He had finally learned to value crying over the wreckage of the past and the promise of the future. Take it, I whispered. Build something good. Build something honest. Teach these kids that money comes from sweat, not from scams. I will, she sobbed. I promise. I spent the rest of the afternoon there. We made plans. We talked about recipes. We talked about paint colors. I watched my grandchildren running around the empty space playing tag around the ovens. They were laughing. They were safe. For the first time in months, the knot in my chest loosened. I had lost a son, but I had saved a family. I walked home as the sun was setting. The sky was a bruised purple over the Chicago skyline. The city was moving on. It didn't care about the tragedy of the King family, and that was fine. I was done with being a public figure. When I got to my new bungalow, I checked the mailbox. There was the usual junk mail, bills, flyers, and one plain white envelope. It had no return address. But I knew the handwriting. It was jagged, angry, pressed hard into the paper. It was Darius's handwriting. It was postmarked from the state penitentiary. I stood on my porch holding the letter. The paper felt heavy, like it was carrying a curse. I knew what was inside. It would be pages of blame. It would be accusations. It would be him telling me that it was all my fault, that I had forced him to do it, that I was the villain in his story. Or maybe it would be begging. Maybe it would be a plea for money, for a better lawyer, for a second chance he hadn't earned. I looked at the letter. I thought about the boy I had raised. I thought about the man who had stood over my body with a glass of scotch. I had spent 40 years building a legacy for him. I had spent the last 6 months destroying him to save myself. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy. Hate requires a connection. I just felt nothing. He was a stranger who had tried to kill me. I didn't open the letter. I walked over to the small fire pit I had built in the corner of the yard. I took a lighter from my pocket. I flicked the flame to life. I held the corner of the envelope to the fire. The paper curled and blackened. The flame caught. I watched the handwriting, my name written by my son, turn to ash. I held it until the heat licked my fingertips, then I dropped it into the pit. I watched it burn until there was nothing left but gray dust. I didn't need to read his words. I knew his actions. And actions are the only language that matters. The wind picked up, scattering the ashes across the grass. They were gone. I turned around and walked into my house. I had a bakery to help design. I had grandchildren to spoil. I had a life to live. And for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel empty. It felt clean. 2 years have passed since the day I watched the prison bus carry my son away. 2 years since I burned his letter in my backyard. The seasons in Chicago have cycled through their brutal winters and humid summers, but for me, time has moved differently. It moves slower now. It moves at the pace of a fishing line drifting in the current of Lake Michigan. I am 76 years old today. I do not wear Italian suits anymore. I do not wear the gold Rolex that Darius coveted so much. I wear a flannel shirt, a pair of comfortable jeans, and a fishing hat that has seen better days. I sit on a folding chair at the end of a public pier, the smell of fresh water and algae filling my lungs. To the people walking by, I am just another old man killing time. They do not know that the man holding the fishing rod used to own the skyline behind them. They do not know that I gave it all away. After the trial, after the sale of the estate, and after setting Emily up with the bakery, I had a choice. I could have kept the millions. I could have moved to a private island and drank myself to death in luxury. But I looked at the money in my accounts and all I saw was blood. I saw the greed that had rotted my son's soul. I saw the poison in the chocolate. I saw the needle in the dark. So I purged it. I created the King Foundation. I donated to shelters for the elderly. I funded legal aid for victims of financial abuse. I built community centers in the neighborhoods where I grew up. By the time I was done, my bank account was a fraction of what it used to be. I am not poor, but I am no longer a king. And I have never felt richer. Beside me, my grandson Leo sits on an overturned bucket. He is 10 years old now. He has his mother's eyes and my chin. He is quiet, patient. He watches the red and white bobber floating on the surface of the lake with an intensity that reminds me of myself when I was young before the world told me that money was the only thing that mattered. Grandpa Leo asks, not taking his eyes off the water, "Do you think we will catch anything today?" I smile. "I don't know, Leo. The fish are smart today, but that is not why we are here, is it?" He looks at me, squinting in the sunlight. "We are here to fish." I chuckle. "We are here to wait." Fishing is just the excuse. It is about patience. It is about understanding that you cannot force the river to give you what you want. You have to wait for it. He nods, though I am not sure he fully understands. He is young. He still thinks the world is fair. I hope he keeps thinking that for a little while longer. I look at him and I see the second chance I never thought I would get. I failed with Darius. I gave him everything he wanted and it destroyed him. With Leo, I am giving him something else. I am giving him time. I am giving him truth. "Grandpa," he says after a moment of silence, "Mom said Dad is in a time out. A long time out. Is he a bad man?" My heart tightens. It is the question I knew was coming. Emily has protected them from the gritty details, but kids are smart. They hear whispers. They feel the absence. I set my fishing pole down. I turn to face him. "Your dad made some very bad choices, Leo. He wanted things he didn't earn, and he hurt people to get them. That is why he is away." Leo frowns. He kicks at a loose board on the pier. "But he is still my dad." "Yes," I say gently. "He is. And you can love him. But you have to learn from him, too." "Learn what?" I reach into my tackle box. I don't pull out a lure. I pull out a small silver coin. It is an old silver dollar worn smooth by time. I hold it up. "You see this coin, Leo? People kill for this. People lie for this. Your dad, he thought this was the most important thing in the world. He thought that if he had enough of these, he would be happy. He would be powerful." I hand the coin to Leo. He holds it, feeling the weight. "But money is just metal," I continue. "It is cold. It cannot hug you. It cannot listen to you. It cannot save you when you are drowning. Your dad forgot that. He forgot that being a good man is worth more than being a rich man." Leo looks at the coin, then back at me. "Is that why you gave all your money away, Grandpa?" I nod. "I kept enough to take care of us. But the rest was too heavy to carry. I wanted to walk light. I wanted to be able to sit here with you and not worry about who was trying to take it from me." Leo thinks about this. He looks at the water. Then he winds up his arm and throws the silver dollar as far as he can into the lake. It splashes and disappears beneath the surface. I laugh. A deep belly laugh that scares a nearby seagull. "Why did you do that, Leo?" He shrugs. "It was heavy. I don't want to carry it either." I reach out and ruffle his hair. I feel a lump in my throat. This boy with his empty pockets and his full heart is the legacy I was trying to build all along. I just didn't realize it until I lost everything else. The sun begins to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and bruised orange. It reminds me of the color of the smoking jacket I wore in the video that exposed my son. That feels like a lifetime ago. A different man lived in that house. A different man sat in that study. We pack up our gear. We didn't catch any fish, but it doesn't matter. We caught something better. As we walk back toward my small bungalow, Leo holds my hand. His grip is firm. He is growing strong. Emily is waiting for us on the porch. She is wearing an apron covered in flour. She looks tired, but her eyes are bright. She waves. I look at my small house. It is not a mansion. There are no marble floors. There are no oil paintings hiding safes. But there is warmth coming from the windows. There is the smell of baking bread. There is safety. I think about Darius sitting in his cell. I wonder if he thinks about me. I wonder if he still hates me. Probably. Hate is a fuel, and he has plenty of it to burn. But his hate cannot reach me here. I am insulated by something stronger than money. I am insulated by the truth. I realized that in the end, the chocolate didn't kill me. It saved me. It woke me up from a sleepwalker's life. It forced me to look at the rot in my own garden and cut it out. It was the most painful surgery of my life, but the patient survived. I squeeze Leo's hand. "Come on, little man," I say. Grandma Emily made dinner. We walk up the steps. I don't look back at the city. I don't look back at the past. I step through the door into the light, and for the first time in 76 years, I know exactly who I am. I am not a tycoon. I am not a victim. I am a grandfather. And that is enough. We spend our lives building fortunes to leave for our children, often forgetting to build their character first. Greed is a poison that doesn't just kill the body, it rots the soul and severs the sacred bond of blood. I learned the hard way that sometimes the greatest act of love a parent can do is to stop enabling their child's destruction. True legacy isn't the money you leave in a bank account, but the integrity you instill in those who come after you. When trust is broken, no amount of inheritance can glue it back together. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about how justice is served when you least expect it, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me share these stories with the world. And let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven Darius, or did he get exactly what he deserved? I read every single comment. Until next time, stay safe, stay smart, and never eat the chocolate if it seems too good to be true.